Chapter 1666. It had completely stabilized the 8 long belts of the Sea of Flowers in the Beast Tide. In the process of the battle between the Sea of Flowers and the Beast Tide, the central area had already been fortified. As for the battle between the Sea of Flowers and the Beast Tide, these members were in the same team as them. The examinees who were studying the battle had no way to discover it. However, the audience on Starweb had a bird's-eye view. They were truly facing the battle between the Sea of Flowers and the Beast Tide. For ordinary people, this battle was like an epic movie. It made those who originally did not believe that the Sea of Flowers could stop the Beast Tide. He deeply understood why Black had been able to use this plant Fae back then. Under the Insect Tide, it had defended Millstone Town. It had even refreshed many Spirit Chi professionals' definition of Faes. It turned out that a Fae or Source-type lifeform had been nurtured. It could be nurtured to such an extent. Poison Beauty had now become a complete black bragging. Since the Yellow Sand Castle rose into the sky, she had been bragging about Black non-stop. After Lu Shuang realized that Black's identity must be extraordinary. When bragging about Black, she had to be more cautious than before. He no longer put Black and himself in the same category. Previously, Lu Shuang had lost to Black. Lu Shuang had never understood how she had lost. Many bullet comments asked if Lu Shuang was convinced. Lu Shuang had never publicly expressed that she was convinced of Black's strength. Lu Shuang believed that Black mainly won in the mystery of the Fae. As a B-rank Spirit Chi professional, Black did not have a myth-breed Fae. Lu Shuang's and Black's Faes were Diamond X Fantasy V. If she could know what Black's cat species Fae's abilities and exclusive skills were, she could avoid that cat species Fae's specialty. It might not necessarily not have the strength to fight with Black. But now, Lu Shuang had seen Black. Apart from that 8-tailed spirit cat, the other 2 Faes. Lu Shuang didn't know if Black had displayed all of its strength for these 2 Faes. But even if it was displayed now, no matter which one it was, Lu Shuang knew that she was not a match. Lu Shuang could not help but sigh in the live-streaming room. I am completely convinced by Black. I feel that with Black's strength, he should not lose to those Majesty's disciples. Lu Shuang was a very careful person in the live-streaming room. He never spoke carelessly. Yet, he said something like that. It was because that was what Lu Shuang really thought. Her Majesty's disciple had always been the same as Her Majesty. It was a legendary existence. There were always a few anonymous names on the Sanctuary Division rankings. The Stairway winning streak leaderboard was the same. Most of these anonymous people were the young geniuses of the top forces. Or perhaps, the legendary disciple of His Holiness. Lin Yuan's performance in the Radiance 100 sequence test was quite impressive. Lu Shuang said this from the bottom of her heart. Upon hearing Lu Shuang's words, the livestream instantly boiled over. Cheng, Shuangzi finally has someone he respects. Black is indeed powerful. Just based on the 2 Faes that he displayed, I can't think of any weaknesses that he has. However, it shouldn't be appropriate to compare Black with His Holiness disciple, right? Magic Jiezai, I don't think it's inappropriate. We can't see the strength of Black's 2 Faes through the Starweb, but look at those posts. They all say that Black's sand elemental lifeform is Diamond X Fantasy V. Even the top geniuses are only at this level. Could His Holiness disciple be able to break through to A-rank Spirit Chi professional at the same age as Black and have a myth-breed Fae? Inexhaustible loneliness. No matter what, Black is my fan for life. Unless those His Holiness disciple come out and fight with Black. Otherwise, in my place, Black is the strongest. Lemon Chuxia, do you still remember the bet between His Holiness and the Freedom Federation a month ago? I have a feeling that Black might become the next Radiance Envoys. There is a referendum in the Radiance Envoys voting. Although the referendum only accounts for 10% of the total points, I must vote for Black. Maple Dance, hey, you can't not want to see Black's Bluebird, 8-tailed spirit cat, B, and healing type Fae just because he used this sand elemental lifeform and that plant source type lifeform. The Starweb was full of posts discussing the Sea of Sand and the Sea of Flowers. Black's official fan group was led by the group owner, Liu Lang. They entered the carnival in advance. Lin Yuan and Gao Feng didn't know any of this. Gao Feng looked at the 8 long ribbons of the Sea of Flowers standing proudly in the alien beast tide with a face of shock. The ferocity of the Sea of Flowers even made the alien beast tide. They even faintly felt fear. Gao Feng found that the dimensional lifeforms in the alien beast tide were crazily squeezing into the area between the 2 long ribbons of the Sea of Flowers. I didn't want to be picked by the vines in the Sea of Flowers and become fertilizer. Lin Yuan had used his own strength. He had faced all the Radiance 100 sequence candidates and the assessment content. For a moment, Gao Feng was so shocked that he couldn't even speak. As a member of the younger generation of a top faction, Gao Feng was used to big storms and waves. But everyone present, if it wasn't for Lin Yuan, if it was anyone else, even if it was Zhong Ziyi, Jiyu Lang, and an he, no one could do what Lin Yuan did in front of him. But when he thought that the one who created this Sea of Flowers was a 6-winged fairy that broke the common sense of fairy source-type lifeforms, Gao Feng felt relief. On Lin Yuan's side, he was curiously communicating with Red Thorn. Red Thorn, I remember that you can only specialize 2 types of plants, right? In Lin Yuan's impression, Red Thorn used spores. The child ramets that it could specialize were only the spore cavity and the carnivorous vines. At most, it could only specialize in the water. It could also specialize in red gill-shaped flowers that could fight in the water. But now, the child ramets that Red Thorn specialized through the pink spores. It was a type that Lin Yuan didn't know at all. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's question, Red Thorn said matter-of-factly, Lin Yuan, other than the digestive cavity that I specialized just now, which is filled with digestive fluid, I can also specialize a new type of child ramets. The new child ramets can eat up all these alien beast tides. Lin Yuan, do you want Red Thorn to show you? Red Thorn was very happy to receive Lin Yuan's praise just now. Right now, Red Thorn couldn't wait to receive more praise from Lin Yuan. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan hurriedly interrupted Red Thorn and said, Red Thorn, this is enough for now. You don't have to show the new child ramets first. While speaking, Lin Yuan couldn't help but hold his forehead with his hand. If Lin Yuan knew in advance that Red Thorn could specialize 2 new types of child ramets, the digestive cavity that this child ramet specialized would be the one before Red Thorn. It had never displayed its strength before. Lin Yuan would definitely let Red Thorn be a trump card and hide it. Chapter 1667. Red Thorn didn't specialize its child ramets into spore cavities. It wasn't that there was no way to make the 8 ribbon-shaped Sea of Flowers stand in the beast tide. Firstly, Red Thorn could consume the Eye of Relinquish. It could constantly produce new carnivorous vines. It could replenish the original area. There were many demons and alien insects buried under the Sea of Sand. It could consume the flesh of the dimensional lifeforms under the Sea of Flowers that weren't under the pressure of the beast tide. It could replenish the Eye of Relinquish that Red Thorn had digested. In order not to affect the test, Lin Yuan limited the area of the Sea of Flowers. Otherwise, the Sea of Flowers could expand rapidly. At the same time, the Platinum Fantasy V Red Thorn could easily produce a large number of Platinum child ramets. If the carnivorous vines at the head were all specialized by Red Thorn, they would become Platinum. No matter how ferocious the beast tide was, it could only rely on those simple attacks. It couldn't hurt the carnivorous vines that Red Thorn had produced by devouring a large number of metals and spiritual materials. Lin Yuan was also very curious. What exactly was the 4th specialized child ramet that Red Thorn said could quickly eat up the beast tide? However, Lin Yuan wouldn't let Red Thorn reveal it now. What Lin Yuan was doing now was to adjust the difficulty of the test. He wanted the Radiance 100 sequence test to be able to follow the original preset. It would be carried out smoothly. Lin Yuan had been doing what a fixer should do. If Red Thorn ate up all the beasts in the beast tide, those examinees in the central area wouldn't be able to take the test. Seeing that Lin Yuan didn't allow it to reveal the 4th specialized child ramet, Red Thorn's small mouth couldn't help but pout. If it couldn't reveal the 4th specialized child ramet, how could it receive Lin Yuan's praise? As a source-type lifeform that it had contracted through its blood, Red Thorn's bloodline was closely connected to Lin Yuan's bloodline. Therefore, Lin Yuan immediately felt what Red Thorn was thinking. He quickly reached out and used his finger to touch Red Thorn's long green hair. Red Thorn, you did great. If it wasn't for you, those examinees in the central area wouldn't have been able to hold on. Red Thorn heard Lin Yuan's praise. Its small mouth couldn't help but curl up. Anyway, it didn't matter if it used the fourth specialized child rammet. As long as it received Lin Yuan's praise, Red Thorn would be very happy. As Lin Yuan praised Red Thorn, he reflected in his heart. He had always been silently enhancing Fays. After the Fey was enhanced, there would basically be very few chances for combat. This made Lin Yuan doubt his Fey's strength. He didn't know much about it. When did Red Thorn obtain the third and fourth types of child rammets? Lin Yuan did not know. The third way was to form a digestive cavity outside the body. Each specialized digestive cavity distributed digestive juices to nearby feeding vines, to increase the digestive capacity of the gluttonous vine. From there, the attack and endurance of the Sea of Flowers would be strengthened. He suddenly recalled that Red Thorn had asked him how it should evolve. He had chosen the path of devouring and digestion. This was probably the specialization method of the third child rammets. Red Thorn should have mastered it at that time. Lin Yuan thought to himself, I'm really not qualified to be a spirit chi professional. All along, he had been hoarding resources. They were all inside the spirit lock spatial zone, doing the work of creation masters. He rarely had the chance to go out and train like other spirit chi professionals. He wanted to understand his Fey's strength. He wanted to increase the degree of tacit understanding between him and the Fey in combat. Fighting in the wilderness was undoubtedly the best way. For ordinary spirit chi professionals on StarWeb, they could also use it to match opponents. They could also use the Star Web Tower to match opponents. They could fight tenaciously with their opponents to increase their combat ability. They could also cooperate with the Fey. However, such a method was useless to Lin Yuan. There was no effect at all. It was very difficult for Lin Yuan to meet an opponent that was evenly matched with him on Star Web. Lu Shuang had a public duel in the Star Web arena. Due to the Fey being restrained, Lin Yuan could be said to have done nothing. He had only relied on Genius's spiritual expansion to defeat Lu Shuang. Lin Yuan's biggest problem now was, he didn't understand his own strength. Until now, Lin Yuan had never used all his means. He had gone to battle once. Even the duel with Zhong Ziyi at the Seer meeting. Lin Yuan had concealed his identity as black. He didn't choose to use the Source Sand, Red Thorn, Chimey, or the other Fays. When the Radiance 100 sequence test was over, he would fight with the Freedom Federation's envoys. Lin Yuan felt that he should have a chance to use all his strength. 2 days ago, Lin Yuan had instructed the Medusa demons to cooperate with the spirit craftsmen. They had built a cat garden in the swamp world overnight. There were already over 1,000 feline Fays in this cat garden. These 1,000 feline Fays were arranged to enter the cat garden. They were constantly nurtured by over 100 questions beasts. A large amount of spirit liquids that had been hoarded was also mobilized. What kind of combat power did Genius, which wasn't good at combat, have now? Lin Yuan really wanted to try. Lin Yuan had restricted the expansion of the Sea of Flowers. No matter how the exotic beast tide was consumed, it would always be able to maintain a certain scale and rush to the central area. After re-establishing the fortifications, the excited examinees all commanded their Fays to release abilities against the insect tide. A rotten wood horned centipede spat out a large pool of venom. A rotten wood horned centipede spat out a large pool of venom. When the alien insects and demons stepped into this area, the alien insects and demons were like dead wood, constantly decaying. The alien insects and demons were all like withered wood, constantly decaying. A giant crocodile that was nearly 7 meters in size constantly spat out wind blades from its mouth and slashed at the demons. The exotic beast tide that had been separated by the Sea of Flowers gathered together. They would immediately fight. Under normal circumstances, when the dimensional life forms passed through the Sea of Flowers, The alien insects and demons would already be fighting to the death. Only one type of dimensional lifeform would be left. After all, as long as the alien insects and demons encountered each other, they would immediately determine life and death. The alien insects and demons would attack the examinees. This was because the alien insects and demons treated the examinees as rations. The demons and alien insects were each other's excellent rations. The chaos between the insect tide and the demon tide had greatly reduced the pressure on the examinees. After cooperating with each other, as well as the support from healing-type spirit chi professionals and support-type spirit chi professionals, the people in the center often didn't have to do anything. The position could already be firmly defended. This made many examinees heave a sigh of relief. However, Lin Yuan and Gao Feng, who were in the Yellow Sandcastle, knew. Right now, the assessment method that the Holiness wanted. They could finally start for real. Chapter 1668. The people in the central area were the earliest batch to submit to Li Nao. They had reached an agreement with Li Nao. Now, there were two extremes in this group of people. One was to treat themselves as the true manager of the entire team of over 20,000 candidates. In the central area, they were enjoying the comfortable environment. Some people even took out the prepared delicacies. While eating, they played beast battle chess comfortably. They didn't take into account the border area, where some candidates died from time to time in order to protect their positions. The other was in the central area when there was nothing else to do. They quickly rushed to the outer area to boost morale and fight against the alien insects. Among these people was Li Nao. Li Nao brought 2 support-type spirit chi professionals and 2 healing-type spirit chi professionals. They kept moving around the relatively weak border area. He ordered his main Fae, the Platinum 4 Fantasy 2 folded winged purple wolf. He kept releasing electric arcs to attack the Class 4 demons and alien insects hidden in the beast tide. These Class 4 alien insects and demons were equivalent to Platinum Faes. It was very difficult for ordinary candidates to fight against them. But for Li Nao, it was a very easy thing. After all, the folded winged purple wolf had a grade suppression on Class 4 alien insects and demons. Gao Feng sighed when he saw this scene. These people who stayed in the central area to play beast battle chess, no matter how talented they are. The spirit guards and city guards definitely can't be the spirit guards. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan nodded. From the start of the Radiance 100 Sequences exam, a large number of candidates who were eager to form teams had already been eliminated. Now, all the actions of these young geniuses. They were put on Star Web without any reservation. Naturally, it included the scene of the candidates playing beast battle chess in the central area. These candidates had obviously gained an advantage. But they had also lost the hearts of the people and many opportunities. Because this exam, in a way, is a test. It wasn't as simple as the Radiance 100 Sequences exam. It was also an interview for these candidates to face Quan Huiyaro. At this moment, there should be many veteran forces and top forces staring at these candidates. They wanted to find the best candidates and focus on nurturing them. They wanted to bring them into their faction. But no matter how strong you were, if you didn't have a sense of collective responsibility, in the midst of danger, you would put on the attitude of a winner. You would be hated by others. On the other hand, Li Nao did a good job. At this moment, there was a heated discussion on the Star Web about this matter. Mr. Chen, I really don't know what those people in the middle of the campsite are thinking. Just because you have an advantage in your area, you don't care about the lives of your companions. This car is not going to kindergarten. Why do I feel so uncomfortable when I see this? Wasn't it all thanks to Black that this assessment could be turned into such an easy environment? I really want Black to cancel the Sea of Flowers and let those insects run in. Let's see if these people still have the confidence to play beast fighting chess. Life passerby, don't tell me that these people will become Radiance 100 Sequence members. I don't agree. Such a person doesn't deserve to be associated with the 100 Sequences. Lonesome Walker, I bet that this assessment is not as simple as it looks. Your Majesties should be prepared. Time passed quickly. It had been 41 hours since the start of the Radiance 100 sequence test. The final dimensional rift was about to open. After the dimensional rift opened, there was only 1 day of survival left. As the area continued to shrink, the intensity of the exotic beast horde grew higher and higher. The number of people continued to shrink. In the end, the remaining 10 members were slowly decided. At that moment, right above the core area of the campsite, it opened a dimensional rift in an unreasonable manner. It didn't give the people below any time to react. A large number of abyssal demons gushed out above the heads of the examinees in the central area. The demon horde landed in the core area. Those examinees who had relaxed their vigilance in the core area were trampled into mud by the demon horde. In fact, there were quite a number of examinees among them. They didn't even have time to summon their phase. This scene was completely out of the attention of all the examinees and the audience. The examinees were actually very clear about everything that happened in the campsite. After all, every small area would be assigned with an examinee in charge of investigating the situation. This examinee in charge of investigating would see the examinees in the central area playing beast fighting chess. Naturally, they would be dissatisfied and voice it out. Therefore, the examinees in the periphery were very clear about this situation. If it wasn't for the fact that they couldn't leave, once they withdrew, it was very likely that there would be a breach in the defensive fortifications that had been arranged in advance. Otherwise, even if the examinees in the periphery were not strong enough, they would still want to beat the heads of those examinees in the central area. Right now, in the sky above the central area of the campsite, the demon horde from the Pinnacle Class 2-dimensional rift had arrived suddenly. It made all the examinees' hearts tense up. It also made all the examinees in the periphery feel a little better. This Pinnacle Class 2 demon horde could really be considered justice from the heavens. However, the opening of this Pinnacle Class 2 demon's dimensional rift was much faster. It could be said that it was basically double the consumption of the team's strength. It could be said that this was basically double the consumption of the team's strength. He gritted his teeth and made a decision. Gritting his teeth, he made up his mind. Rows 35 to 50, turn around directly. Rows 35 to 50, turn around directly. Work together to resist the recently opened Pinnacle Class 2 demon dimensional rift. At the same time, provide cover fire for our comrades outside the 50th row. Those who are behind the 50 rows, quickly retreat towards the 50 rows. Try to take away the defensive fortifications in front of you and stack them in front of you. Temporarily set up a defensive fortification outside the 50 rows. I will immediately arrange for healing-type Spirit Chi professionals and support-type Spirit Chi professionals to support you. While speaking, Lee Nao was anxious and shocked. He was anxious because after the battlefield expanded, there really weren't enough healing-type Spirit Chi professionals. He was shocked because Their Holiness must have already predicted the possible scenarios in the assessment. Otherwise, this final dimensional rift, it was absolutely impossible for it to coincidentally open above the central area. It was impossible for it to have opened above the central region by chance. He didn't want to continue helping these examinees. Under the current high pressure, when the third day was over, the examinees should at most be left with 4,000 to 5,000 examinees. Lin Yuan didn't know how fast the assessment space would shrink after 3 days. Lin Yuan didn't know how fast the test space would shrink after 3 days. No matter how the assessment space shrank, it would be controlled by Red Thorn. No matter how the assessment space shrank, it would be controlled by Red Thorn. The survival pressure faced by the examinees was basically enough to maintain the same. However, after 3 days, the agreement that Lee Nao had made with everyone would be scrapped. At that time, it would be the final chapter of the struggle for humanity. In the blink of an eye, it was already the third day. Chapter 1669. At this moment, the audience on Star Web held their breaths. If the entire Radiance 100 sequence test had just begun, the audience would be watching a show. In the midst of excitement, they would take turns to pay attention to their favorite contestants. It was like watching a reality show about survival in the wild. However, 3 hours later, the first dimensional rift opened. When Black faced the exotic beast Tide, He let the yellow sand castle rise into the sky. The audience was shocked by Black's ability to change the landscape. Then, they all paid attention to Black. They watched as more and more examinees gathered in the central region. The fortifications were built bit by bit. As long as the audience wanted to watch, they could automatically shift to each examinee's point of view. The audience was looking forward to a real collision between the exotic beast tide and the examinees in the central region. But when it really collided, due to Ji Changdeng's suggestion and Liu Wanqing's misjudgment, the examinees were so devastated by the exotic beast tide that they couldn't even breathe. At this moment, outside the central region, all sorts of terrains, it instantly turned into a bouncing sea of sand. It instantly wiped out all the alien insects and demons within the sea of sand. It stopped the exotic beast tide's footsteps. It allowed the examinees in the central region to reinvigorate themselves. At the same time, 8 long ribbons of the Sea of Flowers appeared in the sea of sand. It allowed the audience to finally see Black's second Fae. The methods that Black's 2 Faes displayed were simply too shocking. Every audience was so shocked that they couldn't take it all in. There were tens of thousands of examinees in the central region who were working hard to set up the infrastructure. But it wasn't as exciting as the confrontation between the Sea of Flowers and the exotic beast tide. There was an intense confrontation between the Sea of Flowers and the exotic beast tide. When the exotic beast tide that had passed through the Sea of Flowers rushed towards the examinees again, the audience didn't have much anticipation. However, the pinnacle Class 2 abyss dimensional rift above the central region's core location. Everything was no longer as simple as it seemed. After this pinnacle Class 2 abyss dimensional rift carried out heavenly justice, it then carried out a true tribulation for the surviving examinees. Originally, after the adjustment, it accepted the examinees that gathered from other regions. It caused the examinees in the central region to expand to nearly 26,000 examinees. However, the beast tide from both inside and outside had been devouring for several hours. The number of examinees dropped by half. At this moment, there were only over 12,000 examinees left. Moreover, among these 12,000 examinees, apart from the healing type and support type spirit chi professionals who were especially well protected, there were only a few who could survive. Basically, everyone's phase were injured. Even the spirit chi professionals were injured. As for the healing type spirit chi professionals and support type spirit chi professionals who were well protected, they had to be protected. It wasn't like he was taking advantage of the team's bonuses. The healing type and support type spirit chi professionals were even more miserable. All of them had overdrawn their spiritual power. He was so exhausted that he couldn't even stand properly. However, he still had to heal the dying phase of the other candidates. Great waves washing away sand. Although the number of examinees had been reduced to 10,000, there were still more than 20,000 examinees. But now, the overall quality of the examinees was different. It was obviously a huge improvement. This kind of wilderness survival could improve a person's strength in all aspects. Show it in the most objective way. The first 50 people who went with Li Nao to the core area had varying strengths. These people were the first to join the team. He had always occupied an advantageous position in the team. However, the initial group of more than 50 people had not yet recovered. There were less than 20 people left. This meant that this test was dependent on luck. In fact, there wasn't much preferential treatment. Under normal circumstances, the people in the core area, they were like Li Nao. They would pull their own team and constantly provide support at the front. Otherwise, if they lost their prestige, they wouldn't be able to fight for the last 10 spots in the test. A person's strength wasn't just displayed in the most intuitive strength. Communication ability, adaptability, willpower, and all other aspects of abilities. In the process of survival in the wilderness, it was also the standard to measure whether a person was strong or not. Right now, there were a few people who obviously couldn't join the team at the beginning. But now, they had a prestige that was second only to Li Nao. They had many supporters. These people could stand out in the team. It was because they had leadership skills that far surpassed ordinary people. However, the higher the ability, the greater the responsibility. These people could obtain such high prestige. These people had sacrificed much more than others. It was inseparable. Right now, Li-Nao's main Fae, the folded purple spear's wings. It was attacked by a gliding jumping demon team. His wings were bitten off by the gliding jumping demons, leaving several large holes on his wings. Gliding jumping demons were one of the few level 3 demons that were adept at using poison. Poison hidden in the nails and teeth of the glider hopper. It could produce an extremely powerful hallucinogenic ability, causing the target to go berserk. Li-Nao's Platinum 4 Fantasy 2 folded winged purple wolf was originally a capable fighter. They could use long-range elemental attacks and arcs of electricity. They attacked the flying demons and alien insects in the sky. But now, if the folded winged purple spear was affected by the gliding jumping devil's poison, after breaking free from Li-Nao's control, he started to attack his surroundings. That was the folded wing purple Speothos, whose eyes were red from killing, going all out. He used the platinum skill, purple electricity scattering. It would instantly kill all the examinees within a 500-meter radius. The team, which didn't have many people to begin with, lost nearly 1,000 members. As a result, the folded wing purple wolf was infected by the poison and was struggling. Li-Nao had no choice but to cut his losses and let his other main Fae, the stacked wing purple spear, kill it. Fortunately, they were in the star web. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for Li-Nao to make such a decision in reality. However, as a former Radiance 100 sequence member, Li-Nao, who had gone out to train frequently, knew that, even if he encountered such a situation in reality, he had to make such a choice. Li-Nao couldn't do something like letting nearly 1,000 people die with his Fae. As a leader, he had to make a decision when it was time to make a decision. Even if the folded wing purple spear perished, it would have a huge impact on his strength. It wouldn't be beneficial for the duel after the agreement was cancelled. At that moment, most of the people's gazes were gathered on Li-Nao's perspective. The folded wing purple spear's death made everyone realize that this was war. When these prodigies were fighting against the Class 2 dimensional rift, they were in such a sorry state. When the dimensional rift was active, what about the various city guards and spirit guards that were constantly fighting against the Class 3 and Class 4 dimensional rifts? Many of the audience started to examine this question in their heart. Basically, most of the ordinary people didn't feel the effects of the active dimensional rift. They didn't feel the effects of the active dimensional rift. Chapter 1670. The audience had such a feeling. In the Yellow Sand Castle, Lin Yuan was watching all of this. His thoughts were also surging. The night before the Radiance 100 sequence test, Lin Yuan and Su Iren had communicated. Although Lin Yuan had been preparing for the Radiance 100 sequence, he could not go to the Divine Wood Federation. However, he still had to communicate with Su Iren every few days. Through communication with Su Iren, Lin Yuan understood. There was a drastic change in the Deep Brahmin Federation. The various hidden noble families of the Deep Brahmin Federation began to command the merchant caravans. It was no longer like before, when they collected resources and sold resources at the same time. Instead, they took out their own funds and began to stock up on the existing resources on the market. It could be said that within a dozen days, the atmosphere of the entire Divine Wood Federation changed because of the Deep Brahmin Federation's merchant caravan, and became serious. Su Iren speculated that the Deep Brahmin Federation would likely start a war that would affect the entire continent. When Lin Yuan heard this, he did not have any special feelings. But now, Lin Yuan felt it was time for him to make some preparations. At the same time, Lin Yuan thought his current accumulation of resources was already abundant enough for a private faction. But compared to the Federation, a continent, it was far from being comparable. This made Lin Yuan feel a sense of urgency. Lin Yuan realized that Gao Feng had wanted to help more than once. But in the end, Gao Feng forced himself to endure. Lin Yuan said to Gao Feng, "Gao Feng, you can go and help if you want. When you participated in the Seer meeting, many people saw your phase. It is not a secret. The Freedom Federation must have gotten hold of the relevant information. Your greatest bargaining chip is your sacred source lifeform. And your yellow spring lily's new ability. The breeze hibiscus and spirit spring lily's ability is mainly to restore spiritual power for others. If you want, you can use it. In Lin Yuan's opinion, Gao Feng came from a top faction. He was also Lord Cicada's disciple. If he did nothing in the entire test, he would become a 100 sequence member in the Yellow Sand Castle. After that, Gao Feng would definitely be talked about. The current situation was the best time for Gao Feng, a pure support, to show his strength. When Gao Feng heard this, he looked at Lin Yuan with gratitude. It was not just because Lin Yuan had been protecting her since the beginning of the 100 sequence assessment. It was also because Lin Yuan was truly considerate of her. He could turn the day and night spirit silver into feathers and form wings on his back to take him flying. Similarly, this kind of feather could also be placed on other people. He brought the others along with him. However, to do so, he needed to inject spiritual power into the day and night spirit silver's feather. At that time, the feathers would become lustrous white. It could no longer maintain its original black color. Under Gao Feng's shocked gaze, Gao Feng saw a large number of black metal feathers emerging from the Yellow Sand Castle. These black metal feathers instantly changed color. Behind him, 2 pairs of pure white wings appeared. Then, the wings flapped. Gao Feng clearly didn't do anything. A thin layer of feathers wrapped around its back and connected to its wings. He was like a big bird, flying high in the sky. As soon as Gao Feng left the Yellow Sand Castle, he immediately became the target of the other level 4 demons and alien insects. But in the end, all the long-range attacks were useless. They were all blocked by the 2 pairs of pure white wings. If there were demons and alien insects near him, the 2 pairs of pure white wings flapped and shook off a large number of pure white feathers. This beautiful scene was filled with murderous intent. Each feather was like a dagger. As it flew, it pierced the bodies of the alien insects and demons. Gao Feng, who was originally dressed in white, was like an angel descending. He landed in the crowd, beside Li Nao. Gao Feng landed, and the feathers behind him withered. He fell to the ground under his feet. Then, he quickly turned into yellow sand and disappeared into the soil. This made the examinees near Gao Feng and the Star Web audience immediately understand. The white wings behind Gao Feng should be a means of Black's sand-type source-type lifeform. But when Black flew, why were the wings black? But when it came to Gao Feng, why were the wings white? Since ancient times, black and white were the easiest to couple. And many people were discussing it on the Star Web. Gao Feng was the one with the most connections among all the examinees, because Gao Feng went through Black's back door. He was directly locked in the Yellow Sand Castle by Black. There was a feeling of keeping a mistress in a golden house. All of a sudden, everyone in the Star Web's Chiebar forum was shocked by this scene. A large number of posts about Black and Gao Feng appeared. The Black Wind CP group was also quickly established. At this time, the central area was in the most dangerous time. Everyone was thinking that Gao Feng would go at this time. What did it mean? He wouldn't be kicked out by Black, right? If he was really kicked out of the Yellow Sand Castle by Black, it was fine. Why did Black put a pair of wings on Gao Feng's back? Was it because Black was a very gentle and soft-hearted person? Was he more sentimental? If that was the case, then Black, who looked cold and aloof at the same time, looked cool. He was simply too cute. Gao Feng didn't have many fans on the Star Web. But there were many fans of Black. Seeing the Black Wind CP fans crazily posting, Black's male and female mothers directly exploded with anger. What? My son hasn't grown up yet. Why are you making him a CP? According to the original situation, the fans of both sides would definitely quarrel. But all this had not happened yet. Black's male and female mothers all felt that. It seemed that the Black Wind CP was not impossible. Gao Feng, you're pretty good. After Gao Feng arrived at the scene, he said directly to Li Nao. Get all the healing type and support type spirit chi professionals to come to my side immediately. If someone else had arrived at the scene, they would have given him instructions immediately. Li Nao would definitely ignore it. However, Gao Feng had flown out of the Yellow Sand Castle. The Yellow Sand Castle could be said to be the biggest barrier for all the examinees. It was as if he was the biggest NPC in the entire exam. Without the bouncing yellow sand and the sea of flowers blooming in the yellow sand. Now, the number of people taking the test should be 0. When Gao Feng issued such an order, there had to be an intention behind it. However, it had just cut its losses and killed one of its main phase, the folded wing purple wolf. Li Nao's mental power was severely damaged. He still needed to recover for a while before he could stand up and continue moving. Therefore, Li Nao nodded at the remaining 97 team leaders. The 97 team leaders all glanced at Gao Feng. Only then did he call over a portion of the healing type and support type spirit chi professionals. At this moment, 2 pure white flowers quietly bloomed. Chapter 1671. When Gao Feng arrived at the scene, he gave instructions to Li Nao. This made the 97 team leaders around Li Nao rather dissatisfied. What? Call all the support type spirit chi professionals and healing type spirit chi professionals over? At that moment, the power offense type spirit chi professionals that were fighting against the insect tide were all injured. Their spiritual power was almost exhausted. They were relying on the support type spirit chi professionals at the back to restrain the alien beasts. At the same time, they were buffing their own side. The healing type spirit chi professionals were enduring the overdraft of their spiritual power. The few healing abilities that were released were better than nothing. The support type spirit chi professionals and healing type spirit chi professionals were the only 10,000 people left in the team. They were the most important supporters. Now that all of them were called over, it was the same as letting the power offense type spirit chi professionals who were already struggling. They had lost their last barrier. The team would have a large number of casualties. Without the healing type spirit chi professionals and support type spirit chi professionals at the back to support them, the power offense type and defense type spirit chi professionals would instantly lose confidence. However, Li Nao had already nodded. Furthermore, Gao Feng was a young master from a top faction. Under the watchful eyes of the entire star web, he should not do anything that would damage the team. Therefore, these team leaders had decided to mobilize the healing type spirit chi professionals and support type spirit chi professionals who no longer had any combat ability. At that moment, because of Gao Feng's actions on the star web, there was an intense discussion. Don't want to live and don't dare to die. What's going on? This candidate from the Yellow Sand Castle is taking over the battlefield as soon as he arrived. Is he trying to openly fight with Li Nao for authority? Passerby, no, I feel that gathering the healers and support type spirit chi professionals is the same as killing those power offense type spirit chi professionals. Their spirit chi has been exhausted and they are barely holding on. If we rashly change the situation, wouldn't that be adding fuel to the fire? Sour sweet self-knowledge. Why do I feel that Gao Feng must have his own plans for gathering the healing type and support type spirit chi professionals together? Otherwise, why would he put himself in danger by staying in the Yellow Sand Castle and going through the back door? Memories in the wind. I know the inside information and really can't be bothered to say anything. Open your eyes later and take a good look at the top strength of the younger generation. Memories in the Wind was an internet celebrity with a lot of fans on the star web. Memories in the Wind had so many fans. It was not because of how powerful the Memories in the Wind were. It wasn't because of the Memories in the Wind, or how interesting the livestream was. Memories Amidst the Wind had never opened a livestream. He just shared his life on the private Tiebar forum that he had applied to set up. As a member of the younger generation who came from a top faction, the daily life of the Memory in the Wind consisted of dishes made of platinum spiritual ingredients. In addition to the Memories in the Wind, he was a Class 3 creation master. He would share some of his insights on concocting spirit liquids. The Memory in the Wind had become the dream boy of many girls. It was rare for a top force member to be so high profile on the star web. Memories in the Wind posted in Lu Shuang's live broadcast room. It immediately attracted the attention of many spectators. What was the strength of the top of the younger generation? Everyone agreed that black was at the top of the younger generation. Many people even felt that His Holiness's disciple was not necessarily stronger than Black. However, the bullet screen that Memory in the Wind had just sent was obviously not directed at Black, but at Gao Feng. Could it be that Gao Feng was someone who got in through the back door? Could he even represent the top strength of Radiance's younger generation? What a joke! It was not that Gao Feng had not made a move before. He only summoned a flower species Fey and released a gust of wind to blow away one of the contestants. It was such an ordinary attack. At most, he could use the wind to restrain the flying demons and alien insects. The role that he could play in the team was impossible to surpass Li Nao. However, before the Starweb netizens could think more, 2 white flowers quietly bloomed in front of Gao Feng. After the flowers bloomed, they didn't immediately release the ability. Instead, the plant took root in the ground and kept sprouting. Subsequently, 7 or 8 branches grew out. On each branch, a pinkish-white lily that was bigger than a watermelon bloomed. Immediately after, these blooming lilies created a layer of ripples. Every lily bud spat out a stream of water in the shape of a dragon. These dozens of dragon-shaped gushing springs flew in the sky. They constantly collided with each other. Every time they collided with each other, these dragon-shaped gushing springs would rise into a cloud of mist. More clouds accumulated, and the color of the sky slowly turned blue-gray. The entire sky turned gloomy. Just as the audience and the examinees discovered that these 2 plant fays were very extraordinary. Just as they were guessing what these 2 plant fays were doing. Only to hear Gao Feng shout towards the sky. Spirit Spring Lily. Spirit Spring summons rain. Rapid rain nourishment. In an instant, bean-sized raindrops smashed onto the healing type and support type spirit chi professionals that had gathered. These support type and healing type spirit chi professionals that had just gathered were drenched. If it was before, everyone would be drenched. They would definitely be very unhappy. Moreover, there were many females among these examinees. But now, these examinees had been killing for 3 days. Everyone was exhausted and even in a daze. After being drenched by the rain, they were much more spirited. Just as they were waiting for Gao Feng to speak and to see what instructions he had, these healing type and support type spirit chi professionals, who were drenched by the spirit rain, discovered that the spiritual power in their bodies had just been consumed. It was being replenished rapidly. Even the dried up spiritual power in their phase had been restored. This spiritual power recovery speed was simply appalling. It would definitely take less than 2 minutes for each examinee to replenish their spiritual power. After Gao Feng replenished the exhausted spirit chi for the 300 examinees in front of him, he said, "All of you, return to your original positions and fight. Your teammates protected your lives, so you have to be worthy of your teammates' contributions." At this moment, Li Nao was already stunned by Gao Feng's move. In an instant, he replenished the exhausted spirit chi for the 300 examinees. In an instant, he replenished the exhausted spirit chi for the 300 examinees. What kind of support technique is this? It could be said that the strength that Gao Feng displayed was far beyond Li Nao's understanding. With such strength, was there really a need for Gao Feng to participate in the Radiance 100 sequence test? To put it bluntly, he was a support-type spirit chi professional in the Radiance 100. There were probably not many who were stronger than Gao Feng. The spectators on Starweb were still doubting Gao Feng. But very quickly, these doubts disappeared. In everyone's subconscious, it could be said that they all had heroic sentiments. Chapter 1672. At that moment, Gao Feng was like a divine soldier descending from the sky. He had completely satisfied the hidden heroism in the hearts of the audience. It could be said that among the 4 major combat class spirit chi professionals, the power offense type spirit chi professionals were the most numerous. Their overall strength was also the strongest. Defense type spirit chi professionals were the best partners for healing type spirit chi professionals. Healing type spirit chi professionals were often the most indispensable existences in a team. Compared to the status of these 3 types of spirit chi professionals, the status of support type spirit chi professionals had always been at a relatively low level. For example, Those main teams in the S tournament would usually guarantee the allocation of combat-class Spirit Chi professionals, defense-type Spirit Chi professionals, and healing-type Spirit Chi professionals. Unless it was a special support-type Spirit Chi professional. Otherwise, they would not be considered a team. For example, among the A-class guild clubs, the top three were the Dragon Gate Guild Club and the Rhine Guild Club. They did not have support-type Spirit Chi professionals. This made the audience, who mainly watched the S tournament, to understand Spirit Chi professionals. They subconsciously thought that support-type Spirit Chi professionals were useless. But now, Gao Feng's move, it made the ordinary audience suddenly realize something. It turned out that a powerful support-type Spirit Chi professional was actually so important in a team, while Gao Feng was recovering the spiritual power of these 300 people. He was also helping Li Nao to recover the spiritual power that he had consumed. This caused Li Nao to look at Gao Feng with eyes filled with gratitude. After some hesitation, Li Nao stood up and thanked Gao Feng. Then, he rode on his main Fei, Rotten Spot, and continued to shuttle around the team. Then he rode on his main Fei, the Rotten Spot Dog, and continued to shuttle around the team. Li Nao's actions stunned Gao Feng and the other 97 team leaders. Li Nao's actions stunned Gao Feng and the other 97 team leaders. They immediately understood that Li Nao's actions were to give the command of the team to Gao Feng. Li Nao would make such a choice. On the one hand, it was to measure Gao Feng's strength. Gao Feng had such strength, and he was not qualified to compete with Gao Feng. Gao Feng could recover the spiritual power of Spirit Chi professionals in a range. Even if he did not transfer the control of the team to Gao Feng had such a thought in his heart. He could also seize the control of the team in a short period of time. On the other hand, for this team that was formed by him, Li Nao, who was full of responsibility, could not ignore these Class 3 and Class 4 demons and alien insects that could fly. He was continuously killing the candidates who were at the edges, trying to protect their companions behind them. At this moment, everyone's gaze was focused on Gao Feng. Therefore, not many people noticed Li Nao's behavior. They wouldn't understand the deeper meaning in Li Nao's heart. However, the majesties on the golden stone pillars started to discuss among themselves because of Li Nao. Liu Wencheng said with admiration, "Night leaning moon, cicada cry, do the two of you have any intentions of nurturing this Li Nao? If not, it's not a bad idea to let Li Nao stay in the Radiant Sacred Hall as a deacon," Night leaning moon said directly after hearing this. It's overkill to let Li Nao stay in the Radiant Sacred Hall as a deacon. Li Nao's current strength is not strong enough. But Li Nao's two main Feis have been nurtured quite well. Li Nao, who is compatible with a power offense-type canine Fei, will have many excellent choices for the next Fei contract. In addition, Li Nao's ability to command a team has improved after some training. He definitely has the ability to lead an army of more than 10,000 people. The cicada continued Night Leaning Moon's words. Li Nao is very good at looking at the big picture. While ensuring his own interests, he is able to abide by his heart. Such a talent is suitable to learn from the city lord. After the assessment, I'll get someone to find out which city Li Nao is from. I might as well ask the city lord of the big city that Li Nao is in to take care of Li Nao. Cicada Cry's words were basically equivalent to choosing Li Nao. However, Cicada Cry did not choose to let Li Nao become Gao Feng's junior brother. Instead, he intended to give Li Nao to the Castellan of a big city. He asked the city lord of the big city to nurture Li Nao carefully. Iron Prison, who did not speak much, stood at the side. He said as he looked at the few examinees who were bravely fighting against the evil demons and alien insects. Apart from Li Nao, there are a few other candidates who have good potential and temperament. But in my opinion, it's impossible for these people to be the last 10 survivors. I suggest that we let the city guards of the various main cities hire these exam candidates. Invest a certain amount of resources into these candidates. As he spoke, Iron Prison looked at Cicada Cry. When Cicada Cry heard Iron Prison's words, he nodded. It was obvious that he agreed with Iron Prison's words. However, Night Leaning Moon was not having it. Why? In your eyes, the spirit guards are not qualified to nurture these exam candidates. How many resources can the city guards have? I can arrange for this batch of excellent exam candidates to be taken care of by the guard envoys so that they can gain some experience. I can only grow faster in the spirit guards. Iron Prison looked at Night Leaning Moon helplessly. He had only said that the city guards could nurture these exam candidates. He did not say that the spirit guards could not take in these exam candidates. Why did Night Leaning Moon suddenly attack him out of nowhere? Originally, Iron Prison wanted to say that he controlled the sin cleansing pond. He also needed a few prison guards. But now, if Iron Prison were to say these words again, it would be difficult for him to say it, be it compared to the spirit guards or the various main cities. The sin cleansing pond was not competitive at all. The 300 healing type and support type spirit chi professionals were fully replenished with spiritual power. They returned to their original positions and poured out a large amount of spiritual power from their bodies. In an instant, nearly 1,000 exam candidates who were about to lose their lives to the alien beast tide. They were pulled back from the gates of hell. They also saved the lives of the fatally injured exam candidates and Fays. It was not that these healing-type spirit chi professionals did not want to let these dying exam candidates recover from their injuries. However, doing so would consume too much spiritual power. Rather than saving one person's life, it was better to let 10 people not die. This was the only way to resist the alien beast tide to the greatest extent. Right now, there were still over 8,000 people left. They were all the true elites of the Radiance Federation's younger generation. Everyone knew that the longer this exam dragged on, the more meaningful it would be. This meaning did not refer to whether an individual could enter the Radiance 100 sequence. It was the Freedom Federation and the Azure Federation's envoys who were watching the ceremony. As the Radiance Federation's top young generation, it was necessary and also had a duty. They had to display their strongest strength to win glory for the Radiance Federation. They had to let the Azure Federation's and Freedom Federation's envoys understand the Radiance Federation's strength. At that moment, Gao Feng waved his hand. In an instant, all the Starweb viewers fell into shock again. Chapter 1673. The dragon-shaped spring that was originally spat out by the spirit spring lilies formed clouds in the sky. They only gathered within a radius of 200 square meters. The dragon-shaped spring that spewed out from the blooming lily collided with each other. They relied on the rising clouds to maintain the continuous rain of spiritual power from the sky. But now, the two spirit spring lilies that received Gao Feng's command swayed their branches. With themselves as the center, they formed two spiritual power vortexes. Then, each flower trembled violently. Every trembling flower spewed out at least 9 dragon-shaped spring streams. Hundreds of dragon-shaped springs flew above Gao Feng's head. Previously, the dragon-shaped springs collided with each other to form clouds. But now, these dragon-shaped springs directly collided with each other fiercely, until one side smashed the other side. Then, the smashed side was absorbed into the body. During this process, the area of the clouds was constantly expanding. At this moment, the sky above Gao Feng's head seemed to have formed a battlefield that was even more intense than the confrontation between the candidates and the exotic beast tide. Among them, there was a dragon-shaped spring that had the upper hand at the beginning. Slowly, this dragon-shaped spring became the winner. It kept devouring the other dragon-shaped springs. The dragon posture of this dragon-shaped spring also became clearer. When the last dragon-shaped spring was devoured, the surface of the dragon-shaped spring suddenly condensed into one pure white lily after another. The area of the clouds had expanded to nearly 2,000 square meters. Such an area could easily cover 1,000 candidates. However, the situation was critical. Those power offense-type spirit chi professionals were at the front of the team. Even if the Fays and themselves were already riddled with injuries, they were still struggling to resist the insect swarm. Gao Feng could not transfer the healing-type spirit chi professionals and support-type spirit chi professionals like before. He would transfer these power offense-type spirit chi professionals and defense-type spirit chi professionals who were at the front. Then, he would help them replenish the consumed spiritual power in their bodies. Gao Feng did not have such an idea. Otherwise, Gao Feng would not expand the area of the clouds to such a large area. Seeing the lily dragon spirit take shape in the sky, Gao Feng immediately issued a command. Starting from right in front of me, move the clouds and send a spiritual power shower. Spirit spring lilies, do your best to restore my spiritual power. Hearing Gao Feng's instructions, the stalks of the two spirit spring lilies directly extended. The elongated flower twined around Gao Feng's body. The flower of the spirit spring lily stuck to Gao Feng's waist, shoulder, and back. He poured his spiritual power into Gao Feng's body. The 50-meter-long translucent dragon spirit was like an auspicious sign. Hundreds of blooming lilies twined around it, wrapped in clouds and mist. Above the examinees, clouds and rain could be seen. Under the torrential rain, the examinees who were enveloped by the torrential rain discovered that the spiritual energy in their bodies had been depleted. In just 2 minutes, it was immediately filled up. It was the same for his phase. These examinees took advantage of the process of the spiritual energy shower. He madly used his spiritual energy like it was free. He tried his best to clear the exotic beast tide in front of him. Using this opportunity, the corpses of the alien insects and demons piled up high. Although the insect tide and the devil tide were two different dimensional life forms, they were different. But whether it was the insect tide or the devil tide, they had one thing in common. That was, before launching an attack, if there was a comrade's corpse under his feet, they would prioritize the food that reached their mouths first. Actually, the reason why the insect swarm and the devil swarm kept advancing was because of the constant advancement of the insect swarm. It was to obtain flesh and blood energy to increase their strength. Gao Feng originally wanted to help all the examinees recover their spiritual energy. But at this moment, he was stunned by what the examinees were doing while bathing in the spiritual energy shower. Of course, Gao Feng could understand such an approach. However, even if Gao Feng had the spirit spring lily to help him recover his spiritual energy. But in the end, he wasn't a heavenly god. His spiritual energy couldn't be consumed endlessly. It was already extremely difficult to replenish the spiritual energy of 8,000 people at one time. If all the people who were replenishing their spiritual energy under the spiritual energy shower, they were squandering their spiritual energy in the spiritual energy shower. Fundamentally speaking, Gao Feng was replenishing the spiritual energy of more than 15,000 people at one time. Gao Feng couldn't bear this. The lily dragon spirit drove the rain clouds at the speed set by Gao Feng. It moved toward other areas of the crowd. The examinees who squandered the spiritual energy in their bodies felt the speed of the dragon spirit above their heads. They couldn't help but continue to save their spiritual energy. In less than 10 minutes, the lily dragon spirit became more and more transparent. The raindrops also turned from a shower to a drizzle. When the lily dragon spirit completely disappeared, the rain clouds in the sky dissipated. Gao Feng, on the other hand, ungracefully fell to the ground. Even the two spirit spring lilies were listless on the side. Obviously, the spiritual energy in his body had been exhausted. However, as a spiritual object that was naturally good at gathering spiritual energy, even if the spirit spring lily's spiritual energy was exhausted, it still wanted to recover its spiritual energy. It wouldn't take much time. In the process of the spirit spring lily recovering its spiritual energy, the flowers attached to Gao Feng's back lit up. Spiritual energy began to flow into Gao Feng's body. Then, Gao Feng, who had recovered a little spiritual energy, waved his hand. A huge green and white hibiscus appeared in front of Gao Feng. After this hibiscus appeared, its petals immediately swayed and turned into a rain of flowers. Every petal accurately landed on a candidate's body. On the examinee's body, a hibiscus mark was formed. This hibiscus mark swayed with a breeze. On one hand, it could form a weak protective layer for the examinee. With this kind of protection, even if an elite demon smashed it with a heavy fist, it could break through. Basically, It could only block some sand and stones that were blown over. However, this hibiscus mark's true strength was. It wasn't because of its defensive ability. It was because it could use this breeze to capture the spiritual energy in the air. It would then guide the spiritual energy into the examinee's body. It allowed many examinees to feel what was called meticulous care on the battlefield. Especially those power offense-type spirit chi professionals and defense-type spirit chi professionals. They had been lacking in spiritual energy for at least a day. It had been maintained at the level of spiritual energy overdraft. Under the condition that their spiritual energy was not overdrafted, they could use as much spiritual energy as they could. There were clearly times when phase could release abilities to resist damage. However, it might consume more spiritual energy. The phase simply used their bodies to bear the damage. After being in such an environment for a long time, Gao Feng's powerful support ability made these examinees who were blessed. They almost wanted to turn around and call Gao Feng Mom. From Gao Feng, these examinees all felt like a mother. Meticulous care. The breeze of the hibiscus had a cleansing effect. It removed the blood and dirt from the examinees' bodies. It made every examinee feel abnormally refreshed. The audience on Star Web had been praising Gao Feng and Li Nao. They thought that Gao Feng had connections. Chapter 1674. Although it had just acknowledged Gao Feng, it was far inferior to Black's ability to make the yellow sand castle rise into the sky. It used the boiling quicksand to devour the beast tide. In the sea of sand, it was so shocking to set up 8 sea of flowers. It was not as good as Li Nao leading a team of 10,000 people to resist the beast tide. It was so praiseworthy to show one's leadership ability everywhere. However, Gao Feng had just replenished the spiritual power of the 300 healing-type spirit professionals and support-type spirit chi professionals as well as their phase. He had once again used a shocking method. Within 10 minutes, he had replenished all the examinees present. All of them had been replenished. He had allowed every examinee to replenish the spiritual power in their bodies. Previously, the 8,000 examinees had seemed a little powerless in the insect tide. It was as though they could be devoured by the insect tide at any time, but now, the examinees were fighting against the insect tide. They had already gained the advantage. Even the power offense-type spirit chi professionals in the front row could throw the insect corpses behind them. They had formed a buffer zone. In the situation where they had sacrificed themselves, they could fight for more buffer time for their companions at the back. After more than 2 days, the examinees' mentality had been constantly changing. From the very beginning, everyone wanted to fight for the 10 Radiance 100 sequence spots. Later on, when fighting side by side, they had seen the excellence of their companions. They had realized their own shortcomings. It could be said that every examinee in their own environment. They were all absolute geniuses. After all, the Radiance 100 was simply too big. But now, everyone was cooperating with each other. It was far more clear than fighting. They could feel each other's strength. Especially the examinees in the front row. To be able to survive until now, they had already entrusted their backs to each other several times. The other party had not let them down. This caused the examinees to change from the original competitive relationship. It had imperceptibly become a comradeship. These feelings would not end with the exam. Even if everyone was in different places. On Star Web, they would often gather together. The behavior of the examinees in the front row made the High Lords on the golden stone pillars reveal a faint smile. It seemed that the innovation of the Radiance 100 sequence exam this time, apart from a little mistake by Ji Changdeng and Liu Wencheng, it was very successful. Because in this trial, a dazzling light was born. This allowed one of Hui Yaro's meanings to be automatically passed down. Night-leaning moon said to the left palm officials Wu Ming and the right palm official Yu Zhe who were standing behind her. Sought out the information of the examinees who spontaneously built a natural barrier for their companions. I plan to form a new team in the Spirit Guards. When the time comes, you guys will be in charge of contacting these exam candidates. The treatment will be based on the Radiance 100's resources. Zhu Ming and Yu Zhe nodded. Knowing what these little fellows had done, he received the chief guard's appreciation. In Zhuo Ming and Yu Zhe's hearts, these little fellows were indeed worthy of such an honor. At that moment, the Moon Empress, who hadn't spoken much, spoke up. Qing Yu, let Xian Yu handle the matter of organizing the information. It's much more convenient for Mystic Moon to access the star web's information than others. The assessment of the 100 sequence this time has shown us something far more dazzling than one's own strength. In my own name, I will take out a sum of resources. I'm here to help you prepare this new spirit guard. The Moon Empress words startled the 12 abyssals present. In the past, the Moon Empress would address Night Leaning Moon as Chief Guard Yi. Why was it suddenly like 10 years ago? She began to call Night Leaning Moon by her name. The Moon Empress had never spoken of the longevity rat situation. During Wang Ting's meeting, she didn't mention much about her situation. The other abyssals only knew that the Moon Empress' sacred weeping moonbeast was under her command. Its strength had reached the eternal realm. The Moon Empress' strength had also broken through. However, Night Leaning Moon had always been guarding the Moon Empress in the Radiant Moon Palace. Therefore, she understood the Moon Empress' situation better than the other abyssals. It was likely that the Moon Empress was willing to take out a sum of resources to help him. It was most likely because the Moon Empress wanted to return the favor. This favor came from the Moon Empress herself. On the other hand, the Moon Empress should be helping Lin Yuan return the favor. However, the Moon Empress shouldn't know. In fact, she was the one who owed Lin Yuan a favor. Lin Yuan gave himself the feather that contained the power of night. He also gave Liu Jie 12 source-type cocoon demon embryos. It gave Liu Jie a limitless future. It was tantamount to Lin Yuan building a bridge to heaven for herself and her inheritance. Night Leaning Moon simply did not know how to repay Lin Yuan's favor. Therefore, the Moon Empress proposed this sum of resources. Night Leaning Moon subconsciously wanted to open her mouth to refuse. However, before Night Leaning Moon could speak, the Moon Empress continued. I will take out a sum of resources to help Leaning Moon. If the rest of you are lacking in Creation Master resources, you can also come to me for help. The Moon Empress words stunned the 12 abyssals, including Night Leaning Moon. Then, the eyes of the old man sitting on the middle stone pillar suddenly lit up. Leaning Moon, do you mean that your Creation Master rank has broken through like before? The Moon Empress had never been a high-profile person. She didn't like to announce her abilities to outsiders. But now, the Moon Empress openly admitted it. My Creation Master standard has indeed improved. I'm going to try to see if I can extract the pure power of eternity from the Eternal Heart phase. If possible, I plan to use the pure power of eternity as the standard for a Class 6 Creation Master. The Moon Empress words excited the other 12 abyssals. Since the Moon Empress had said such words, it proved that the Moon Empress was confident of becoming a Class 6 Creation Master. Chef Supreme and Bamboo Monarch looked at each other. As the older Class 5 Creation Masters of the Radiance sect, when the two had become Class 5 Creation Masters, the Moon Empress had yet to become a Radiance Envoy. Now, the Moon Empress, who had become a Class 5 Creation Master, had caught up. Bamboo Monarch and Chef Supreme had not grasped the opportunity to improve their Creation Master abilities. But the Moon Empress had already reached that level. The Radiance sect no longer had 3 Class 5 Creation Masters presiding over it. Instead, it had 1 Class 6 Creation Master and 2 Class 5 Creation Masters presiding over it. Among the 13 abyssals, everyone was on equal footing. But if one really wanted to compare, apart from the old man, the Moon Empress was already firmly in second place. Feeling the others' gazes on her, the Moon Empress' expression did not change at all. Logically speaking, the Moon Empress would not reveal the news of her Creation Master abilities to anyone. But after a round of comprehensive consideration and careful consideration, the Moon Empress decided to step forward. Dare to be the first in the world. Chapter 1675. At that moment, the Moon Empress felt rather complicated. For a person who was used to keeping a low profile, he suddenly became high profile. Courage was required to do so. So far in the world, no one had mentioned the definition of a Class 6 Creation Master. The Moon Empress felt that it wasn't because there weren't any creation masters in the world that had reached this stage. Before he became the third Class 5 creation master of the Radiance sect. The Azure Federation already had 3 Class 5 creation masters. The Freedom Federation had 4 Class 5 creation masters. Furthermore, there was a clear Class 5 creation master's legacy. In the early years, Hui Yao only had 2 Class 5 creation masters. The concept of 3 great federations had yet to be fully established. It was the Moon Empress who had ascended to become a Class 5 creation master. After the Radiance Federation announced the third Class 5 creation master, on the surface, the Radiance Federation had the same number of Class 5 creation masters as the Azure Federation. Only then did the origin world have the concept of 3 great federations. The Azure Federation was a family-style federation. It was different from the Freedom Federation and the Radiance Federation. In the Azure Federation, there was no concept of an overlord. The patriarchs of the 12 great Azure families were the common masters of the Azure Federation. In such a family-style federation, as long as a family had a Class 5 creation master on the surface, they would be able to take over the federation. If someone in the family became a Class 5 creation master, they would usually hide it as a secret trump card. The Freedom Federation, in terms of overall strength, it was slightly stronger than the Radiance Federation and the Azure Federation. In the early years, he had 4 Class 5 creation masters. In the past 150 years, because of the internal strife. Moreover, 2 Class 5 creation masters had perished. Therefore, even though the Moon Empress' strength had increased tremendously, she still couldn't control it. He still hadn't underestimated the Freedom Federation. Furthermore, the Moon Empress felt that according to her star rating, it would be better to use the star rating. It wasn't as if the Freedom Federation didn't have anyone that could reach the standard of a Class 6 creation master. The Moon Empress had raised the concept of Class 6 creation masters in the origin world by herself. This was tantamount to gathering the attention of the entire origin world on him. This wouldn't benefit the Moon Empress at all. However, he would do so in a month. On one hand, it was extremely beneficial to Hui Yao. Right now, the Radiance Federation and the Freedom Federation were wrestling. The Moon Empress needed to give the other High Lords and even Quan Hui Yao a reassurance pill. Otherwise, if the Moon Empress wanted to hide her Class 6 creation master abilities, she wouldn't be able to do so. He would not be able to provide creation master resources to the other 12 eminences. The other 12 majesties were not fools. Once the Moon Empress used her ability that surpassed that of a Class 5 creation master, she would be able to defeat the Moon Empress. The other party would be able to sense it very soon. By then, the news of him becoming a Class 6 creation master would naturally be exposed. Rather than that, it would be better for the Moon Empress to make a public statement. Unless the Moon Empress wasn't going to give any creation master resources to the other eminences. Only this way, the other eminences wouldn't know that the Moon Empress had become a Class 6 creation master. However, the origin world was on the brink of an upheaval. The Moon Empress had to step forward and increase the strength of the other majesties. Only in this way could Hui Yao survive the turmoil of the origin world. To become the everlasting mountains and rivers. On the other hand, with the development of Sky City's forces. In addition, Lin Yuan had taken out the Golden Lotus Brocade plant, various ordinary Class 5 creation masters, and even the Moon Empress herself. Something that could not be cultivated. Lin Yuan was still in the growth stage. In terms of overall strength, even if they could fight above their level, they would still have the battle prowess of an emperor. But at the end of the day, he was just a B-rank spirit chi professional with a peak fantasy breed fae. A spirit chi professional could not be considered a king-class expert without reaching A rank. Therefore, instead of letting the other federation's people focus their attention on Lin Yuan, it was better to let them all fall on her. Right now, even if the Moon Empress was facing the Freedom Federation's 3 self-proclaimed gods, she could also be fearless. The Freedom Federation's 3 self-proclaimed gods. They only relied on 11-star sacred source lifeforms. 10-star sacred source lifeforms could trigger astronomical phenomena. 11-star sacred source lifeforms could already turn astronomical phenomena into a function for their own use. This ability was indeed no different from the traditional definition of God. Coincidentally, with Lin Yuan's help, the Moon Empress was able to call herself God. Now, she also had the qualifications to call herself God. However, the Moon Empress did not plan to call herself Moon God. The Moon Empress defined a Class 6 creation master for Hui Yao, the first below carnate beings. It was also to protect her disciples' safety as a master. These two responsibilities drove the Moon Empress. She made a choice that went against her character. As for her strength, the Moon Empress planned to remain the same as before. She would only show it when it was necessary. She listened to the other Her Majesties congratulating her. The Moon Empress nodded in response. The Moon Empress could not help but think of the pure spirit qi that Lin Yuan had provided for her. The pure spirit qi had allowed the Moon Empress to awaken her life providence. After awakening her life providence, she had taken another step forward. It was because of this step. It allowed the Moon Empress to have a new understanding of life. It allowed the Moon Empress to have another opportunity to improve her creation master standard. However, after the Moon Empress's creation master standard had improved, she went to mix the spirit qi. She found that the spirit qi that she had used all her strength to mix was still of a lower purity. It was still a little less pure than the spirit roast peony that Lin Yuan had given her. Class 1 to Class 5 creation masters had a clear classification of stars. Each star had an iconic measurement standard. However, these measurement standards were just man-made. It was just like how the Moon Empress had designated the purification of eternal power from the eternal heart image as the measurement standard for a Class 6 creation master. But different paths led to the same goal. The standards of a creation master really needed to be meticulously classified. A creation master's ability to compare. In the end, it was just a competition of who could mix a higher concentration of spirit qi. After all, spirit qi was everything. It was the foundation for phase to evolve and mutate. The Moon Empress had already evaluated Lin Yuan's creation master strength in her heart. Lin Yuan was clearly her disciple. However, the Moon Empress felt that Lin Yuan's ability as a creation master. It had already exceeded her understanding. Moreover, Lin Yuan had used a special method to control a Class 5 creation master. This Class 5 creation master was the culprit that had caused the destruction of the whale ocean trade, Di Wanmi. Even if Di Wanmi had just become a Class 5 creation master. In terms of pure spirit qi, he might be weaker than veteran Class 5 creation masters like the Chef Supreme and the Bamboo Monarch. However, purifying the power of willpower from the willpower rune. Purifying the power of law from the law rune. Purifying the power of world from the world crystal. Purifying the power of immortality from the immortal body was very easy. At the same time, he could also use the bodies of dead sacred source lifeforms to refine artifacts. For Di Wanmi, who was already a Class 5 creation master, it was just a matter of reaching out. Chapter 1676. A month before the Moon Empress went into seclusion, she had thought about Hui Yao's situation. At that time, Hui Yao's top creation master resources were far superior. There was still a certain gap between them and the Freedom Federation. Now, Radiance had one Class 6 creation master and two Class 5 creation masters. Behind the scenes, there was still Lin Yuan. It meant that Radiance would have at least one more Class 6 creation master and a Class 5 creation master. The Moon Empress had never believed that Lin Yuan could concoct pure spirit qi. Everything depended on the standard of a creation master. After all, given Lin Yuan's strength, it was impossible for him to find the path to become a Class 5 creation master. A creation master's strength was closely related to a spirit qi professional's strength. However, as long as Lin Yuan could concoct such pure spirit qi, he would be able to use it. Lin Yuan could be considered a Class 6 creation master. Compared to extracting the power of eternity from the eternal heart image, mixing pure spiritual qi was undoubtedly more important. The Moon Empress specially inquired about it and found out that it had the momentum to become one of the top 3 factions of the Radiant sect. The Coiling Dragon Valley that filled the void of trade in the Whale Ocean. The Coiling Dragon Valley had obtained plenty of law crystals from Lin Yuan. Even Coiling Dragon Valley's old patriarch could become an undying. It was also related to the world crystals that Lin Yuan had provided. At that time, Lin Yuan had indeed controlled Di Wanmi. However, Lin Yuan had already traded law crystals with the Coiling Dragon Valley. Moreover, the Miao family's beast creation garden had been destroyed by Sky City. He had also traded law crystals with Lin Yuan. The Moon Empress clearly remembered that she had not given him the law crystal. After all, the Moon Empress had never thought that Lin Yuan would grow so quickly. He did not expect Lin Yuan to use something like a law crystal. After discovering Lin Yuan's extraordinariness, he blinked his eyes. Lin Yuan had already grown to the point where he could help her. Not long ago, he even brought him to the swamp world. It absorbed the moon in the swamp world. The Moon Empress felt that Lin Yuan's growth was very important. As the master, it was very difficult for him to be of any more help. However, the Moon Empress could do her best. Go and guard Lin Yuan and protect him. At that moment, the other High Holiness didn't know what the Moon Empress was thinking. Sincere and joyful smiles appeared on the faces of the 12 kings. The old man sitting on the golden pillar in the middle heaved a sigh of relief. He raised his hand to the sunlight and looked at his wrinkled and old palms. The old man felt that he could finally relax at this moment. The old man believed that as long as his body was strong enough, he could hold on for another 5 years. Give the Moon Empress another 5 years to accumulate. Even if he really was on a journey to the west. The Moon Empress could also take over his position and protect Hui Yarrow. At that moment, the Mountain River Set Bells, one of the 4 important artifacts of the Radiant Stabilization Nation, appeared. The sound suddenly became faster. Ripples splashed above the barrier erected by the set of mountains and rivers. Through the barrier, one could faintly see a figure standing in the air above the barrier. In an instant, the dozens of bells on the Shanhe State Bells. It glowed with a magnificent bronze light. The figure of a man covered in mountain patterns and the figure of a woman covered in river patterns. One on the left and one on the right, they appeared beside the chimes. Each of them held a wooden mallet in their hands. Both men and women wore musician hats on their heads. They were like 2 court musicians. Immediately after, the wooden mallets in their hands were wrapped in a huge force and knocked on the set of mountains and rivers. A song that was filled with murderous intent suddenly rang out. The sound of the bell was magnificent. With every chime, a fairy holding an orchid appeared out of thin air in the sky. The fairy flew into the sky with a gentle and beautiful posture. The body of each fairy was formed by water patterns. The silk on their bodies was covered with mountain patterns. The orchid in their hands continued to grow as the fairy flew in the sky. Finally, the orchid pole became a sword. The orchid leaves were like streamers. The 36 fairies seemed to be waiting for something. At that moment, in the middle of the 36 flying fairies, a dancer who looked like a sacrificial priest appeared. In the hands of the dancer, a handful of silk threads condensed from mountain patterns and river patterns appeared. These silk threads were tied to the bodies of the 36 flying fairies. In an instant, the killing intent of these flying maidservants merged together. It was as if these 36 fairies could form a sword formation with the orchid sword in their hands at any time. They attacked the figure standing in the air at the top of the protective shield of the set of mountains and rivers. This was the killing formation formed by the set of mountains and rivers. It was the song of the set of mountains and rivers. Feeling this killing intent, he had already logged out of the star web. Li Shu, who was waiting for the god of pity to descend, narrowed his eyes. It was undeniable that Hui Yarrow's national stabilizing treasure was indeed powerful. Thinking of this, Li Shu looked fearfully at the old man sitting in the middle of the golden stone pillar. Back then, this old man had risked his legs to no longer be able to walk and lost a lot of his life force. He also had to refine the 7 national stabilizing treasures. They could indeed protect Hui Yarrow's country. Although the set of mountains and rivers attacked spontaneously, it was far from as sharp as the attack of a celestial phenomenon. But it was not much different from a casual attack of a celestial phenomenon. It would take some effort for him to receive this attack. During this process, if someone with the same strength as him suddenly made a move, he would not be able to escape. He would definitely be at a disadvantage. To a certain extent, the 7 national stabilizing treasures of Hui Yarrow with different functions, together with Hui Yarrow's majesty. It could guarantee that Hui Yarrow's majesty would have the upper hand in a battle with someone of the same strength. Even if the Radiance Federation's national stabilizing treasures were not defined as tools to assist Hui Yarrow's majesty. Now, the set of mountains and rivers was a spontaneous attack. Presumably, it should be able to easily kill a peak creation stage spirit creature. It could even seriously injure a fae that had an immortal body and activated an immortal body. However, this level of attack was far from enough for the God of Pity. Even if this attack hit the God of Pity, she only relied on the power of her life providence and did not activate her spirit chi to protect herself. She could still block it unscathed. At that moment, among the 13 majesties, the bamboo monarch, who had not spoken much, suddenly appeared. A purplish gold bamboo pattern suddenly lit up on his forehead. His eyes also turned purplish gold at that moment. A purplish gold bamboo shadow connected heaven and earth like a pillar supporting the sky. Together with the soaring fairies, it attacked the figure above the shield. Right at this moment, a voice that seemed to pity all living beings resounded. I didn't come to the Radiance Federation to provoke conflict. I came here to bring everyone back after the end of the Independent 100 sequence. While speaking, a golden red slender fishtail suddenly stretched down from above the shield. This fishtail was only the size of a normal human's legs. Its tail fin was full of cinnabar spots. These cinnabar spots emitted a captivating red divine brilliance. This seemingly soft fishtail collided with the purplish gold bamboo shadow. Chapter 1677. The fishtail emitted a golden red radiance that immediately covered the purple light of the bamboo shadow. The fishtail and the bamboo shadow collided, but it was not as expected. There was a fierce battle. The fish's tail calmly blocked the purple gold bamboo shadow. It was like a pair of hands blocking a pair of chopsticks. It made the chopsticks unable to move forward. The orchid swords held by the 30 fairies holding the orchid swords. At this moment, the fishtail heavily chopped at the fishtail. The fishtail shook slightly, and the golden red light shadow was like waves. It swung toward the 30 fairies holding the orchid swords. In an instant, these fairies holding the orchid swords collapsed into mountain patterns and river patterns. It could be said that the fishtail swung down and blocked the bamboo monarch's attack. It also easily dissolved the attack from the mountain river set bells that could kill a creation breed fae. At this moment, the pitying voice of the woman sounded again. Bamboo monarch, your attack just now was still at the level of 10 years ago. In these 10 years, it is impossible that you did not improve at all. It seems that the Radiance sect is still the same. You like to hide all your abilities. I blocked your attack, and I didn't even retaliate. This is my sincerity. While speaking, the fishtail swung. The golden red light shadow was like a wave, rushing toward the purple gold bamboo shadow. The surging waves instantly crushed the purple gold bamboo shadow into pieces. At this moment, the figure with the golden red fishtail stood up completely. She was wearing a golden red long gauze. On the long gauze, there were huge pearls hanging one after another. The gauze could not hide the woman's exquisite body. Her face was exquisite, and her skin was snow white. Her long golden red hair hung below the fishtail. There were 2 red moles at the corners of her eyes like cinnabar spots on the tail. It could be said that other than her skin, the woman's entire body was golden red. However, there was a trace of blue in her golden red eyes. Although this blue was weak, it easily covered the golden red color. It was as if this blue was the most agile part of the woman's body. Looking at the woman who appeared in the shield, the 13 majesties on the golden stone pillars all had serious expressions. However, compared to the 13 majesties of the Radiance sect, there was an even bigger reaction. He was one of the Freedom Federation's ambassadors, standing at the very back of the group. The examinee's originally expressionless face suddenly revealed an expression of disgust. At the same time, there was a deep fear. This figure looked at Li Shu, who was at the forefront of the Freedom Federation's diplomatic mission. Li Shu noticed the gaze of this figure. Seeing the surging gray in the figure's eyes, Li Shu communicated directly with this figure through his soul power. Second page of revival. The arrival of the pitiful goddess will not affect our plan. Don't worry too much. The expression on the figure's face did not change. But after hearing Li Shu's words, the surging gray in his eyes became even more intense. Li Shu, the person the pity goddess hates the most is me, followed by the Moon Empress. If the compassionate goddess knows of my existence, can you guarantee that she won't attack me or affect my movements? Li Shu glanced at Qian Yu. Back in the Sacred Hall of Liberty, it was decided through a meeting. Li Shu was the only leader of this diplomatic mission. Every majesty of the Freedom Federation operates their own forces, controlling the interests of one side. The cooperation with Second Page of Revival was privately contacted by Li Shu himself. The other majesties of the Freedom Federation did not know. However, Qian Yu was the pity goddess's caretaker. He contacted the pity goddess in private and invited her to come personally. Although Li Shu got the news from Qian Yu in advance, he was rather unhappy. However, in the Freedom Federation, everything was based on strength. Although they were all majesties, the right to speak was very different. In front of the pity goddess, Li Shu could not change her decision. In the face of Second Page of Revival's doubts, Li Shu could not give an accurate answer. Li Shu had just arrived in the Radiance Federation and came into contact with Second Page of Revival. He was dissatisfied with Second Page of Revival. This was because the Radiance 100 sequence exam had officially begun. Li Shu had not seen the existence of Sixth Page of Flogging. More than once, Li Shu had asked Second Page of Revival about the Black Mass Cup. Second Page of Revival did not give an affirmative answer at first. However, when he asked for the second time, Second Page of Revival said very firmly. This made Li Shu feel that Second Page of Revival was not reliable. Therefore, facing Second Page of Revival's doubts, Li Shu said directly, "The pity goddess's arrival will not affect our cooperation. According to the content of our cooperation, you do not have to reveal your identity in front of the pity goddess. Even if the pity goddess really finds you, I will share some benefits with her. Before our cooperation ends, I guarantee that the pity goddess will not make a move on you." If the entire Radiant Sacred Hall had not been enveloped by the stately bells, it would take a certain amount of time to break through the stately bells, and Second Page of Revival would definitely leave this place immediately. This was because too many situations had exceeded Second Page of Revival's expectations. Moreover, until now, the pity goddess had not found Second Page of Revival. In order to take that step, the pity goddess had used the blood of the deep-sea merfolk to wash her body. She had forcibly allowed her body to obtain the merfolk bloodline. Because of this, the deep-sea merfolk were almost extinct. Among the Ocean Empire's 8 clans, the Emperor Whale clan, which was originally a vassal of the deep-sea merfolk, had lost their support. Even so, the Emperor Whale clan was still ahead of the Emperor Ray and Emperor Mermaid clans. However, because of this method, she had forcibly obtained the merfolk bloodline. The pity goddess had been cursed by the deep-sea merfolk. To break the curse, the pity goddess needed to purify the merfolk bloodline in her body. To let the merfolk bloodline in her body reach a certain level, there were 2 ways to improve the merfolk bloodline. One was to continue to use the blood of ordinary merfolk to wash herself. The other way was to gain the love of the mermaid royal family. Only by being marked by the mermaid royal family with a reverse scale could the bloodline be improved again. After learning about this, the pity goddess had mobilized the power of the entire Freedom Federation. She had searched all over the world. In the end, her efforts had paid off. The pity goddess had finally found a group of deep-sea merfolk in the sea near the Forbidden Land. The bloodline of these merfolk was very thin. The pity goddess had wanted to catch this group of deep-sea merfolk and raise them to achieve sustainable development. However, the original plan of the tower cannon also required the merfolk bloodline. It was Second Page of Revival who had personally killed this group of deep-sea merfolk that the pity goddess had treated as a treasure. They had extracted the merfolk bloodline and brought it back to the tower cannon. Because of this reason, there had been a rift between the Tower Cannon and the Freedom Federation, which had been relatively close. Later, the Tower Cannon told the Pity Goddess a piece of news. It was that the deep-sea merfolk were probably the descendants of a high-level dimensional creature in the water world. Chapter 1678. Back then, these high-level dimensional lifeforms might have come to the origin world through a pinnacle Class 5 dimensional rift. They reproduced in the deep sea and left behind descendants with relatively thin bloodlines. At first, the Pity God did not accept this explanation. However, one of the Freedom Federation's experts had contracted the origin water, a sacred source lifeform, which was the origin water. It made the Pity God feel close to the bloodline source. Thus, the Pity God believed the pagoda cannon. The Pity God used her resources to nurture this expert. Along the way, she even nurtured this expert into the Freedom Federation's majesty. In the end, this expert died at the hands of the Moon Empress. This allowed the Moon Empress to take her place and become the person that the Pity God hated the most. However, the Pity God did not even have the slightest bit of hope. Apart from hating the Moon Empress, she would still hate herself. Second Page Revival made up his mind. In a while, when the competition started, he only wanted to protect himself. Even if the younger generation of the Freedom Federation envoys were all dead, he would not make a move. After calculating the time, he remembered that Lord Scarlet Page's 4 riders were about to arrive. Second Page Revival's heart calmed down. When the Bamboo Monarch heard the Pity God's words, he said coldly, "It's not a good habit to come uninvited. As for how capable we are, you don't have to worry about it." The Pity God did not care about the Bamboo Monarch's words. However, when she looked at the Moon Empress, her entire body suddenly turned cold. Her eyes were filled with killing intent. "Moon Empress, long time no see." The Moon Empress looked up at the Pity God and said, 10 years is indeed a long time. Even if we don't do anything right now, our strength will still improve. But you have been standing still. You must not be having a good time, right?" When she heard the Moon Empress' words, the Pity God was so angry that she laughed. The mermaid bloodline could not be improved, and the Pity God's strength was completely stuck. Therefore, even if the Pity God had suffered a lot in the past 10 years, in terms of strength, she still did not make any progress. The Moon Empress' words were the same as touching a sore spot. The Pity God had only come to the Radiance Federation to bring Qian Yu back safely. Because of Qian Yu's sacred source lifeform, the Pity God saw new hope. Otherwise, the Pity God would not be in the mood to choose a favored person and train him. However, after hearing the Moon Empress' words, right now, Lianshan really couldn't take this lying down. "Moon Empress, I haven't made any progress for the past 10 years. But so what if my strength hasn't improved in 10 years? You, on the other hand, don't have much lifespan left. If you can't fight against the heavens, you'll only be struggling at death's door. If your strength hadn't improved by leaps and bounds 10 years ago, in another 3 to 4 years, I think there will be one less Lord of Radiance. The number of Class 5 Creation Masters in Radiance will also decrease by 1. By then, the Radiance sect will have 2 Class 5 Creation Masters again. It's the same as a few decades ago, 1 less than the Azure Federation. When the time comes, the 3 great federations should be properly ranked. I heard that the Sand State Federation has a 2nd Class 5 Creation Master. I wonder if the Republic of Radiance will be able to maintain the glory of being in 3rd place when compared to the Sand Continent Federation. At this moment, regarding this sudden turn of events, on the 100 silver stone pillars were the Radiance 100 sequence members and the eliminated candidates. They were all watching it happen. The Moon Empress knew that the Goddess of Compassion wanted to make an issue out of her. To belittle the Republic of Radiance. To attack the Republic of Radiance's morale. Therefore, the Moon Empress didn't say anything. She pointed her finger at the Goddess of Compassion. A chain of moonlight shot toward the Goddess of Mercy. The Goddess of Compassion didn't care much. But when she saw the layer of clear brilliance that appeared on the moonlight chain, the Goddess of Compassion's expression immediately turned serious. The dark red cinnabar spot on her fishtail rapidly grew bigger. It turned the originally golden red fishtail into a captivating red. The goddess of compassion did a flip in the air, and her golden-red fishtail fiercely whipped the moonlight chain. At this moment, the goddess of compassion's fishtail was also stained with a layer of clear brilliance. After the two collided, the goddess of compassion looked at the Moon Empress in surprise. Interesting. You've actually resolved the lifespan crisis. Heaven and earth treasures don't have the ability to greatly increase lifespan. I think your strength has broken through. However, awakening the birth providence is just the beginning of reaching that realm. As she spoke, the expression on the goddess of compassion's face was no longer as arrogant as before. Except for that old man, who was a true pinnacle expert at that time. Radiance had produced another pinnacle expert at that time. If it was just the old man, the goddess of compassion was confident that she could escape unscathed. But now, there was another Moon Empress. Even if the goddess of compassion could leave, she would never be able to take Qian Yu away. It was not an exaggeration to say that Qian Yu was the goddess of compassion's life. If Qian Yu died, the goddess of compassion would completely lose hope. Therefore, the goddess of compassion said no more. Her figure flashed in the air and appeared again. She was already beside Li Shu. The Moon Empress and Night Leaning Moon looked at each other. Their original plan was to keep the people of the Pagoda Canon in radiance as much as possible. Back then, the Moon Empress had made such a decision because her strength had increased. But now that the goddess of compassion had arrived, the Moon Empress had to re-examine her plan. The Moon Empress was not afraid of the goddess of compassion. With Lin Yuan's help, the Moon Empress had taken another step forward after awakening her birth providence. Even if she fought with an eternal expert on the land of radiance, the Moon Empress could also guarantee that it would not affect radiance in the slightest. But now, once she fought with the goddess of compassion, the goddess of compassion would use her full strength. It would immediately cause a disaster in radiance. It was unknown how many ordinary people would be affected. Her Majesty's duty was to protect the stability of radiance. In fact, in the origin world, the various federations could maintain relative peace. This was because these federations all had top experts. These top experts were the Federation's strongest deterrent. They were also the foundation of the Federation's self-protection. For example, there were no such top experts in the Agorwan continent's three major federations. There were no Class 5 creation masters. Therefore, even if there were abundant resources, there had never been a moment of true peace. The Radiance Federation and the Freedom Federation had always been arm wrestling. But neither side had chosen to make the first move. It was precisely because of this reason. Because no matter which side made a move, if they did not have the confidence to kill the other side immediately, they would immediately suffer from the other side's counterattack. The goddess of compassion's arrival made the Moon Empress need to adjust her original plan. It was just that she did not know which 2 pages of the Pagoda Canon had come this time. The relationship between the Freedom Federation and the Pagoda Canon had never been able to become truly close. It could be said that 80% of it was because of the goddess of compassion. At least 4 of the 8 pages of the Pagoda Canon had become enemies with the goddess of compassion. They had fought with each other before. The Moon Empress had never planned to do anything to the Freedom Federation's envoy. Therefore, the goddess of compassion's arrival was not considered a bad thing. Chapter 1679. The relationship between the Freedom Federation and the Tower Canon had always been rather ambiguous. In other words, the Freedom Federation and most of the factions in the main world were rather ambiguous. However, they hated each other. This abnormal contradictory situation was mainly due to the relationship between the Freedom Federation and the other federations. It was all up to the overlords themselves. Every majesty, for their own benefit, would go and befriend a faction. However, this kind of friendship usually only represented the overlord themselves. It could not represent the entire Freedom Federation. Just like the Pity Goddess and the Tower Canon. However, the other 2 overlords of the Freedom Federation who were qualified to be called gods and Li Shu were close to the Tower Canon. The Tower Canon would send 2 8-page members to the Radiance Federation, which was the news given by the Heaven-Blessed Mansion. The Heaven-Blessed Mansion had received such a great favor from the Moon Goddess and Lin Yuan. The words that came out of his mouth could not be false. Any expert who could call himself a god had already reached that level. An expert of this level, especially in the Freedom Federation, was extremely powerful. It was impossible for them to wrong themselves and fulfill the interests of others. Therefore, the pity goddess most likely did not know that the Tower Canon had 2 pages. If the Tower Canon's 2 8-page members wanted to find a suitable ally in the Radiance Federation, then the best choice of ally would be Li Shu. The Moon Empress planned to keep an eye on Li Shu and be on guard. In addition, she could not relax on the pity goddess side. Who knew if the pity goddess had other plans when she came? By now, 3 days had passed. The Radiance 100 sequence test was about to come to an end. The area of the test space was rapidly shrinking from the periphery to the inside. The battles on the last day made all the Starweb viewers feel shocked from the bottom of their hearts. This duel had shown all the people in the Radiance Federation who were watching the 100 sequence. It showed the battle between the human spirit chi professionals and dimensional lifeforms. It let people know that peace and stability were forged with flesh and blood. At this moment, there were only 1,700 spirit chi professionals left in the central area. At this time, there were still so many people left. It was mainly due to Gao Feng's efforts. Gao Feng's 2 spirit spring lilies automatically gathered spirit chi. In the air, they formed 2 translucent spirit chi vortexes. These spirit spring lilies transferred all the spirit chi to Gao Feng. They helped Gao Feng recover the spirit chi in his body. The petals of the breeze hibiscus landed on every spirit chi professional and formed a hibiscus mark. It would continuously replenish the spiritual energy of these candidates. In the beginning, Gao Feng's spiritual power was exhausted. It was a harsh burden to nourish over 8,000 spirit chi professionals at once. Under this kind of burden, Gao Feng quickly exhausted himself. If the strength of the 2 spirit spring lilies hadn't reached Diamond X Fantasy V, the skill also had the ability to speed up the recovery of spiritual energy. Gao Feng might even pass out from overexertion. However, even if Gao Feng persevered, the hibiscus imprint's effect on over 8,000 spirit chi professionals was also greatly reduced, like when Gao Feng used it normally. However, it was precisely this trace after trace of spiritual power that was being restored. It allowed these examinees to have hope and rely on him. Even though he was heavily injured and had to be treated again and again, he still persisted. With the continuous loss of members, Gao Feng's pressure became lighter and lighter. When the number of people was reduced to 2,000, Gao Feng's situation of not being able to make ends meet had turned for the better. Gradually, the 2 spirit spring lilies filled Gao Feng's body with spirit energy. Gao Feng used all his strength to activate the hibiscus imprint. At the same time, he let the spirit spring lilies use the lily dragon spirit. The giant dragon image with the lily flower wrapped around it controlled the clouds and rain. It replenished the spiritual power of every surviving examinee and their phase. If Lin Yuan was the savior of the entire 100 sequence exam, he used methods that ordinary examinees couldn't understand to control the exam's difficulty. No matter how Lin Yuan looked at it, he was like an invigilator. Gao Feng's behavior was like the examinee's savior. He was clearly a soft support and didn't attack throughout the entire process. However, he became the examinee's strongest support at this moment. At this moment, the major livestreaming rooms were no longer one-sided praises and Li Nao's bootlicking. Gao Feng's performance had completely suppressed Li Nao. Lu Shuang said with certainty, "The 3 phase that Gao Feng summoned must be 3 Diamond X Fantasy V existences. Otherwise, it is impossible to support the current situation. Moreover, the abilities of these 3 phase must be extremely powerful. Among all the supports that I have seen, Gao Feng might be a soft support, but in a team battle, Gao Feng is definitely the strongest support." While speaking, Lu Shuang pondered. At this moment, Lu Shuang seemed to understand why the Radiance 100 sequence exam started. Black formed black wings on its back and went to look for Gao Feng. Originally, Lu Shuang couldn't understand. But now, Lu Shuang seemed to have thought it through. To put it bluntly, Black and Gao Feng came to this exam to gain experience. Gao Feng and Black both had Diamond X Fantasy V phase. Such strength had exceeded the scope of the exam. The two of them were originally prepared to watch from the sidelines in the Yellow Sand Castle. They only made a move when they saw that the other examinees couldn't hold on anymore. It was rumored that His Holiness Cicada Cry had accepted a disciple. This disciple was a support-type spirit chi professional from a top faction. It seemed like he was a pure support. Thinking about it, this person should be Gao Feng. This was something that Lu Shuang had analyzed from her own level. He definitely wouldn't say it in the live-streaming room. If Gao Feng was really His Holiness Cicada Cry's disciple, only Gao Feng himself could reveal it. If she revealed it herself, it would be overstepping her authority. But if she analyzed wrongly and Gao Feng wasn't His Holiness Cicada Cry's disciple, if she said it out loud, wouldn't it be the same as spreading rumors? She didn't have the ability to arrange a disciple for His Holiness Cicada Cry for no reason. Lu Shuang didn't say anything. The viewers in the live-streaming room started to discuss without any scruples. Snowflakes on the cloud, did you guys see the post on StarWeb? Gao Feng is the young family head of the Gao family, a top faction. No wonder he is so strong. I announce that from now on, Gao Feng is the same as Black. They are both my husbands. Yuro Sakura, sister, tighten your legs a little. First Black is mine, second Gao Feng is also mine. Boots, blooming for your life, I will put a chicken coop here today. Let's see who will crawl into it. Shadow. Gao Feng is definitely the strongest support I have ever seen. I was wrong. I shouldn't have had any prejudice against support-type spirit chi professionals. When I form a team in the Guild Alliance in the future, I must choose a support-type spirit chi professional. Regretful World Walk. I suggest that you guys consider forming a team with support-type spirit chi professionals in the future. After all, not every support-type spirit chi professional is Gao Feng. Chapter 1680. Agate Tangerine. Indeed, after forming a team, the output, defense, and healing are not enough. Just don't blame the support in the team. The comments in the live-streaming room were so fast that Lu Shuang couldn't keep up. It could be said that this duel, which lasted for 3 days, was getting more and more boring. Because of Black, Gao Feng, Li Nao, and a series of heroes fighting in every corner. And it became exciting. A person's quality, ability to resist pressure, communication ability, strength, and other factors. They were all at a glance during the 3 days of the test. In the entire test, as long as they had the ability, they had obtained enough attention and fans. At that moment, a childish post instantly became popular in the forum. The general content of the post was, I am fortunate to have the talent of a combat class spirit chi professional. I must work hard to become stronger. My hometown is in a remote county in Cloud Pool City. There are several swamp dimensional rifts that have opened here, and huge crocodiles and flying insects that are bigger than heads have come out. Giant lizards that can flatten a house with a tail. People who live in our world are used to it. That was because every time a dimensional rift opened up, it would be destroyed. There will always be uncles in black clothes and city guards in green clothes on the scene to solve it. Now, I want to say to those uncles in black clothes and city guards that have worked hard, I must become an uncle in black clothes and a city guard in the future. Through the post on StarWeb, one could see the poster. From the poster's profile picture, one could see the poster's personal space. The person who discovered the post was an 8-year-old girl. A primary school student who had just started a spirit chi professional elementary school. In fact, before this post was posted, many people were already thinking the same thing. The hot-bloodedness in his bones was resonating with an invisible light. There were many spirit chi professionals who didn't intend to go to the abyss world to develop. They packed their bags. Everyone who had the talent to become a combat class spirit chi professional felt that they were lucky. No matter how difficult it was to upgrade phase or how dangerous the battle was. At least when facing danger, they had the ability to protect themselves. More and more such posts appeared. Radiance was dazzling in the StarWeb forum. Everything that happened in the Star Web livestreaming room and forum had nothing to do with the candidates who were fighting the insect tide. The Star Web blocked the outside world from probing the inside. But in the test space, if someone possessed the talent of a creation master, it could detect teammates, opponents, phase abilities, and exclusive skills. The benefits of becoming a creation weren't just about enhancing phase. At the same time, it would be of great help in battle. Fighting against a spirit chi professional that was stronger than him? This benefit was negligible. He could fight against a spirit chi professional who was almost as strong as him. After the creation master understood the other party's strength and exclusive skill, the creation master didn't hesitate. Everything could be prepared in advance and respond effectively. Even if he knew he couldn't win, he could still find an opportunity to escape. He wouldn't have to fight until the very end to realize that he wasn't a match for his opponent from the very beginning. Lin Yuan had checked many people's phase in the Yellow Sand Castle. Li Nao's dead folded winged purple Speothos and the heavily injured rotten spotted Tengu that was still fighting the horned demon. They were all power offense type canine phase. Canine phase were a major species. There were countless outstanding phase. Li Nao's talent gave him the qualifications to become a pinnacle spirit chi professional. Li Nao had only summoned 2 phase. Be it the folded winged purple Speothos or the rotten spotted Tengu. They were extremely outstanding among the canine phase. In Lin Yuan's opinion, Li Nao had a lot of potential to be nurtured. When Lin Yuan saw Gao Feng's Spirit Spring Lily, their abilities were only on the platinum level. At that time, the Spirit Spring Lily didn't have the ability to control the dragon spirit and summon rain. Lin Yuan used Morbius True Data to check on the Spirit Spring Lily. After checking, Lin Yuan discovered something. These 2 Spirit Spring Lily's diamond abilities were surprisingly the same. They were all Lily Spirit Nurturing. For a Fae, the probability of having the same normal ability was very high. In order to make the normal ability the same as the elite ability, one had to choose from hundreds of them. If they had the same silver ability, one would only be able to choose 1 pair from tens of thousands of them. Back then, Lu Pinru wanted to choose normal, elite, and silver abilities. She had spent a lot of effort to obtain the same exclusive skill as the bronze luster branch mulberry silkworm. Even if she had found the Radiance 100 sequence number 18, White Devil, for help. She had spent a lot of effort to find one. Afterward, Lu Pinru joined the Dome Guild Club. She became a member of the Dome Guild Club's reserve team. Lin Yuan helped Lu Pinru search for luster weaver silkworms that met her requirements in the Brahma insect cage. He found 13 at once. The main reason was that the Brahma insect cage was a top faction that monopolized the market and had more than 70% of insect species phase. It had tens of millions of luster weaver silkworms. However, the stronger the Fae, the greater the change in the abilities. After the Creation Master's research, he found out the abilities obtained when the Fae evolved and the Fae's survival conditions. It had a lot to do with the Fae's own thoughts. When a Fae grew to platinum, its bloodline would more or less have some changes. Therefore, for 2 platinum Faes to have the same abilities, this was already a very difficult thing to do. After Lu Pinru enhanced the dozens of luster weaver silkworms, it was impossible to maintain the same abilities. However, this would not affect Lu Pinru. The first 3 abilities were the same, allowing Lu Pinru to quickly assist the team. The luster weaver silkworm's high-grade abilities consumed more spiritual power. It could not be used casually like low-grade abilities. These different high-grade abilities made Lu Pinru's support ability more comprehensive. It increased Lu Pinru's value in the team. Lin Yuan felt that if His Holiness Cicada Cry had not encountered Gao Feng, even if it had encountered Lu Pinru, His Holiness Cicada Cry might have considered taking Lu Pinru as a disciple. For 2 platinum Faes to have the same abilities, the probability was 1 in 10,000. However, Gao Feng was actually lucky that the 2 Spirit Spring Lily's diamond abilities were exactly the same. Lily Spirit Containment absorb the soul of an animal Fae through the roots. Depending on the absorbed animal soul, obtain the ability from the Fae's bloodline and use this ability to spread spiritual power. In Lin Yuan's opinion, the Spirit Spring Lily's diamond ability, Lily Spirit Containment, was rather special. Dragon Spirit was just a form of expression of the Spirit Spring Lily's diamond ability. It was the Spirit Spring Lily's diamond ability, Lily Spirit Containment. If Gao Feng wanted to, he could play more tricks. Chapter 1681. It was the Spirit Spring Lily's diamond rank skill, Lily Spirit Accumulation. It was very similar to Lin Yuan's contracted Golden Wings exclusive skill, Unstable Temperament. During the process of coming into contact with phase, one's temperament was unstable. It could store the phase exclusive skills and passive abilities. At that time, the exclusive skill Unpredictable Temperament would become an exclusive skill and passive skill that could be replaced. The time limit for each replacement was one cycle of the sun and moon. Lin Yuan had yet to nurture the Golden Wing. However, after Chu Xi returned, Lin Yuan had let the Golden Wing use its exclusive skill, Unstable Temperament. He stored the Silver Mirror Radiant Sun Bull's elite skill, Sacrifice. Back then, Lin Yuan had chosen the Dying Sharp Iron Horn Bull. He had taken a fancy to the Sharp Iron Horn Bull's elite ability, Sacrifice. It could be said that Lin Yuan had always coveted Sacrifice. The elite grade ability, Sacrifice, had only been found on cow species phase. However, the chances of this happening were simply too low. When the golden-winged bird became stronger and Lin Yuan's main body was injured, he could share the damage with the Golden Wing. This was a life-saving skill at a critical moment. In addition, it was very easy for the Golden Wing to change its stored passive skills and exclusive skills after using the Unpredictable Temperament skill. One day later, they could make the changes. As for the Spirit Spring Lily's diamond rank skill, Lily Spirit Accumulation. Compared to Golden Wing's exclusive skill, Unpredictable Temperament, the time limit was shorter. However, a large amount of resources had to be invested in the replacement process. After all, it wasn't that easy to refine a phase soul. In order to refine a phase soul, the Fae had to be strong enough. Only then would it be possible for the soul to take form in the process of death. Secondly, he needed the help of a soul-type Fae. Furthermore, this soul-type Fae's strength was not inferior to a myth breed. A soul-type Fae with strength below myth breed. Unless one was extremely talented, they would not have the ability to extract the target's soul. Of course, this situation did not apply to the legendary soul-thought whale. Gao Feng used the Lily Dragon Spirit to summon rain and restore the target's spiritual power through raindrops. It was obvious that Gao Feng had let the Spirit Spring Lily absorb plenty of Flood Dragon species phase souls. On this basis, Gao Feng had many other choices. After all, every Fae had a different innate ability. In the current situation, if Gao Feng allowed the Jasmine Lily to absorb the soul of the Drought Sandworm, it would not be able to survive. In that case, any Spirit Chi professionals or Faes that had their feet on the ground would die. They could recover their spiritual energy through contact with the ground. However, contracting the Drought Sandworm also had its drawbacks. During the battle, flying-type Faes would not be able to replenish their Spirit Chi. However, absorbing the Flood Dragon Fae's soul and condensing the Lily Dragon Spirit was not foolproof. If Lin Yuan and Gao Feng were enemies, he only needed to summon Chimey and let it cast clear skies. The dark clouds formed by the Lily Dragon spirits dispersed. Therefore, if it was really a battle in the wild, Gao Feng should prepare more spirit item souls. Then use it at your discretion. This allowed his Lily Spirit Accumulation to not be countered by the enemy. Lin Yuan was more aware of the difficulty of the test than the other candidates. The test space covered 100,000 kilometers. The speed at which the test space was shrinking was about 10,000 kilometers every half an hour. In other words, 5 hours later, the test space would disappear completely. While the trial space was shrinking, the dimensional rift would not disappear. Instead, they would converge at the center. As the space shrank, it was the same as increasing the cohesion of the exotic beast tide. The decisive factor for the candidates to persist until now was Lin Yuan. If not, they would have taken the initiative to extend their sand palms from the yellow sand and attack the Class 3 and Class 4 alien insects and demons. They would drag the Class 3 and Class 4 alien insects and demons into the yellow sand. Red thorn would constantly consume the eye of relinquish to maintain and expand the sea of flowers. Even if there were 10 more GAO phones, the core region would have long been wiped out. A support was just a support, especially a soft support. When the teammates were strong enough, the soft support would be able to reflect its ability. However, when the team was not strong enough, no matter how strong the soft support was, it would not be able to turn the situation around. Lin Yuan quietly looked at the core region and the 1,000 candidates. At that moment, the oath that everyone and Li Nao had made was already invalid. It was obvious that someone was playing tricks on them. Such a situation immediately caused an intense discussion on the Star Web. Everyone had different thoughts in their hearts. Therefore, the Star Web netizens had different opinions. However, Lin Yuan felt that there was nothing wrong with the current competition. Right now, each of the 1,000 candidates had sacrificed too much for the team. Their bodies were always covered in new injuries and old injuries. In fact, some people's hands and feet were already missing. They were still holed up in the camp and commanding phase to fight. This Radiance 100 sequence test was a competition after all. The first 3 days had already proven these people's character. 3 days later, the competition that had already been decided would naturally be carried out. At that moment, there were only 6 former Radiance 100 sequence members left. It was enough to see how high the quality of the former 100 sequence members was. Right now, the original cooperative relationship had become a competitive relationship. Everyone's reaction was also the focus of the High Lord's assessment. Emotions and rationality had always been two contradictory values. Even if the emotional people had thoughts, it would be difficult for them to make a move on their comrades who had fought for 3 days. The rational people knew that this was an assessment. When it was time to make a decision, they had to make a decision. On the golden stone pillar, Night Leaning Moon and Cicada Cry were both observing. The remaining 1,000 people could be said to be the true elites of the Radiance sect's younger generation. The rational people were chosen by Night Leaning Moon. The spirit guards were in charge of taking in calamitous phase, destroying dimensional rifts, and dealing with emergencies. The spirit guards could be in danger at any time. Therefore, the spirit guards had to have a rational side. The spirit guards and the city guards pursued the duty of protection. The city guards paid particular attention to not abandoning or giving up because they were protecting the big city. In the big city, even if they were pushed back by a step, the people in the big city would be in danger. Therefore, the city guards never abandoned or gave up. They could only advance and not retreat. Emotional people were suitable to be cultivated as city guards. When the spirit guards were in danger, they could be completely wiped out at any time. There had to be rational people to make a decision. When it was time to give up, they had to give up. Sometimes, giving up oneself was also to be able to better protect. At present, the competing candidates in the core area had been divided by the 2 High Lords. They had already been divided by the 2 High Lords. In the next year, these candidates would continuously receive invitations from the true spirit guards and the major city guards. End of this chapter. Chapter 1682. Of course, these candidates could also refuse. However, the candidates who agreed to the invitation would receive a huge amount of resources from the spirit guards and the city guards. Previously, the Indigo Azure Guard captain, the Storm Guard captain, and Lin Yuan had worked together. A large part of those high-quality bronze phase were used to nurture these newcomers. The spirit guards might be dangerous, but they would give great compensation to the families of each sacrifice. Back then, Lin Yuan's parents had only been 2 spirit guards with platinum phase. They were 2 very ordinary members of the spirit guards. In their early years, they had received a lot of resources and help from the spirit guards. After death, they had used their merits to exchange for a source-type item, as well as 100 radiance dollars. Back then, Lin Yuan and Chu Ci had not been able to obtain these resources immediately. This was because Chu Ci's parents had entrusted them to Auntie Zhong and Uncle Li. Auntie Zhong and Uncle Li had become Lin Yuan and Chu Ci's guardians. In addition, their parents' decision was to wait for Lin Yuan and Chu Ci to reach adulthood and have clear values before obtaining this money. When Auntie Zhong and Uncle Li had left the Xia region, they had informed the spirit guards. In the absence of Lin Yuan and Chu Ci's guardians, Dong Hai had immediately set off. He had brought these resources to Lin Yuan. Moreover, these resources were not given in one go. After that, Lin Yuan would receive 100 radiance dollars as compensation every year. All in all, this was a huge expense. However, in recent years, the spirit guards had been constantly increasing this expense. The benefits were getting better and better. This year, they had introduced the service of providing free medical care for family members. If Chu Ci and Lin Yuan were just ordinary people, they would have a yearly supply of 100 radiance dollars. They would be able to live an extremely wealthy life. After all, Lin Yuan had worked in the Fei store for a year. He could only save tens of thousands of Federation dollars. After calculating, it was just a few tenths of a radiance dollar. At present, the number of people in the core area had been sharply reduced to 500. Surprisingly, Gao Feng, who was in the center area, had not been targeted. Gao Feng looked at the examinees who had started to move and sighed. If not for the sake of preserving his strength, Gao Feng would have released his contracted bloodline of Desolation Fei. He should be able to easily hold on until the test space completely disappeared. However, his bloodline of Desolation Fei was different. He was about to face the powerful enemies of the Freedom Federation's envoys. Gao Feng had to hide. One of Li Nao's hands and half of his leg had already disappeared during the battle with the bug tide. At this moment, Li Nao was leaning on the dug position. The rotten spotted heavenly dog was guarding Li Nao's side. Li Nao had been using his full strength when fighting against the insect swarm. Therefore, even with Gao Feng's help, there wasn't much spiritual energy left in the body of the spotted hound. At this time, Li Nao was at the edge. After the outermost power offense-type spirit chi professionals were devoured by the insect tide, Li Nao became the outermost member. Looking at the number of examinees had already decreased to over 300. Li Nao felt that he couldn't hold on any longer. Li Nao sighed slightly. He had originally occupied the most advantageous position in the entire examination. But for the sake of the entire team, he gave up his advantage. The chance to return to the Radiance 100 sequence had slipped from his hands. If it was before the start of the assessment, Li Nao felt that it was impossible for him to do such a thing. But now, this test made Li Nao understand the weight of responsibility. He looked at the 4 horn demons, which had already exhausted their spirit chi and were lying on the ground by the spotted hound, crashing straight at him. Li Nao slowly closed his eyes. He didn't have the chance to enter the 100 sequence again in this assessment. However, he had done what he had to do. Even if he had regrets, he wouldn't feel guilty or blame himself when he thought about it many years later. At this moment, Li Nao suddenly felt his body go soft. The sharp horns of the 4 horn demons, which were supposed to be inserted into Li Nao's body, were inserted into a small piece of quicksand. Li Nao had already sunk into the quicksand. Li Nao, who had sunk into the quicksand, didn't feel suffocated. Because of the flowing sand, Li Nao's nose spontaneously left an airstrike. The sand flow had power. When Li Nao breathed, he wouldn't inhale the sand into his nose. Li Nao instantly knew that this should be Black, who was in the yellow sand castle, protecting him. At this moment, Li Nao suddenly felt that the sand flow was constantly pushing him up. Li Nao felt as though he was being pushed up into the sky. All of a sudden, Li Nao felt his eyes lit up. He saw light. Li Nao opened his eyes and saw a young man with a silver mask standing in front of him. He was sitting on the ground in a sorry state. Due to the previous battle with the beast tide, his clothes were in a mess. Even a part of his body couldn't be covered anymore. This made Li Nao feel rather awkward. At the same time, Li Nao suddenly realized something. The mask on Black's face was completely different from the mask he remembered. The mask on Black's face was no longer the plain silver color on the star web. Instead, it had a few shallow lines. When he was in the 100 Seeds Tower, Lee Nao had really seen this mask. At that time, Lee Nao only thought that it was a low-quality imitation of Black's fan. But he didn't expect it to be Black himself. Lee Nao was just about to thank him when he noticed the young man in black in front of him. He had already handed him a blue and white spirit chi clothing. However, one of Lee Nao's hands and feet had already disappeared. It was already impossible for him to put on his clothes. Thinking of this, Lee Nao, who had read many strange books, suddenly thought of the book about changing clothes in the secret room. Could it be that Black was going to help him change his clothes? It couldn't be. Lin Yuan didn't know what was going on in Lee Nao's mind. Back in Millstone Town, Lin Yuan had helped Zhong Xiaobai regrow his severed arm. In addition, he had fought against Chen Hongfeng in the Star Web Tower climbing match. He had healed the big hole in his shoulder blade. Therefore, Lin Yuan's healing ability was no longer a secret. Just as Lee Nao's imagination was running wild and his face was flushed, Lee Nao saw Lin Yuan raise his hand, and a green beam of light landed on his body. Immediately after, Lee Nao felt the pain in his body weakening. The fine wounds on his body and the injuries to his internal organs were constantly being healed. Immediately after, the amputation of Lee Nao's hands and feet swelled and itched. Lee Nao looked down and realized that his hands and feet were slowly growing back. This made Lee Nao's eyes widen. Previously, there were too many rumors about Black on the Star Web. Lee Nao had paid attention to Black. However, he deeply doubted many of the rumors. At this moment, Lee Nao realized. It seemed that the rumors on the Star Web were all true. Moreover, the rumors didn't seem to be comparable to reality. At this moment, Lee Nao finally knew. Why did Black, who had outstanding combat ability, say that he was a healing-type spirit chi professional? End of this chapter. Chapter 1683. As a former 100 Sequence member, Lee Nao didn't just have strength that far surpassed the other younger generation. He also had an extremely strong vision. Therefore, Lee Nao could see how magical and powerful Black's healing ability was. Healing-type spirit chi professionals were already rare. Compared to combat-class spirit chi professionals, there were only a few hundred spirit chi professionals. Only then would there be one or two healing-type spirit chi professionals. In the early stages, healing-type spirit chi professionals didn't have much combat ability. After the spirit chi professionals reached C rank and the healing-type phase reached silver, the healing-type spirit chi professionals' role in the team would then be highlighted. Otherwise, they would just be at the bottom of the team. They needed protection but didn't have much healing ability. This was also why so many teams in the Guild Alliance needed healing-type spirit chi professionals. They knew that healing-type spirit chi professionals were rare. They would invite all the spirit chi professionals that met the team's requirements into the team like a boss. However, they weren't willing to lower their requirements. Currently, there were 3 healing-type spirit chi professionals in the 100 sequence. Apart from White Devil, who was still at sequence 18 in the 100 sequence. As for the other 2, one was ranked 76th and the other was ranked 81st. These 3 healing-type spirit chi professionals that could enter the 100 sequence had one thing in common. None of them were pure healers. White Devil's healing-type phase could all cause considerable damage to the target. In terms of healing ability, White Devil wasn't even as outstanding as the 2 healing-type spirit chi professionals ranked 76th and 81st. In Lee Nao's opinion, White Devil was a power offense-type spirit chi professional wearing a healing-type spirit chi professional's skin. Such a spirit chi professional would highlight their individual combat ability. However, their value in the team would be greatly reduced. Gao Feng had used his own strength to prove the value of pure support in the team. As for pure healers with similar strength to Gao Feng, their value in the team would only be higher than Gao Feng. Before this, Lee Nao had never heard of any healing ability that could regenerate severed limbs. Even those king-class experts who had their limbs severed in battle. They could only find high-star spirit craftsmen to use jade-textured wood and metals to create some bionic limbs. Bionic limbs were too different from real limbs. In battle, Intense activities would cause the bionic limbs to be damaged. Therefore, if a spirit chi professional was disabled, basically, it would be very difficult for him to join a team of similar strength. They could only team up with teams that were much weaker than them and hang out together. In the Radiance 100 sequence, there was once a 100 sequence member who had lost his right arm while participating in the training. Losing an arm was much better than losing a leg. But even so, in the battle, this member of the 100 sequence who had lost his right arm. From the original 58, it dropped all the way. 2 years later, he fell out of the 100 sequence. As for the technique that Black had just used, perfect to regenerate the short limbs. Previously, Li Nao had heard rumors that Black had made Zhong Xiaobai's arm grow back in Millstone Town. Since there was no video recording at that time, it was all transmitted by mouth. Therefore, not many people believed this rumor. Until Black used his healing ability in the Star Web duel. Only then did many people realize how terrifying Black's healing ability was. He couldn't help but believe in Black. Back then, it was really possible for Zhong Xiaobai's severed limbs to regrow. It was just that no one had ever proven this point. Zhong Xiaobai seemed to be deliberately hiding something. He didn't accept any interviews. In Li Nao's opinion, no matter how strong Black's combat ability was, with just this technique alone, Black was qualified to call himself a healing-type spirit chi professional. He was different from combat-class spirit chi professionals like White Demon, who wore the skin of a healing-type spirit chi professional. Black was a healing-type spirit chi professional who wore the skin of a combat-class spirit chi professional. In a large-scale team battle, if Black was willing to heal the team, when the entire test reached the third day, there would be at least 10,000 people in the team. This was because phase and spirit chi professionals were attacked by the alien insects and demons. The strength of the alien insects and demons was there. The full-powered attack from the Class 4 alien insects and demons could only severely injure a Platinum Fae. However, it wouldn't let the Platinum Fae die. With the healing of a healing-type spirit chi professional, the serious injuries could slowly recover. However, if this attack shattered the bones, it broke the limbs. During the healing process, there was no way to quickly recover the broken bones and limbs. As a result, as long as the alien insects and demons crippled the Fae, it was fine if it was a Fae that relied on elemental combat. It could continue to pour out elemental abilities. However, if it was a Fae that relied on its physical body to fight, these Faes would become the food in the alien beast tide, waiting to be divided by the alien insects and demons at any time. If Black's combat ability was said to be, it made Li Nao feel that Black was a genius that he couldn't compare with. After realizing Black's powerful healing ability and irreplaceable functionality, it made Li Nao realize Black's strategic significance. Black's strategic significance was, in a way, to the entire Federation, it was more important than Black's strength. For some reason, Li Nao felt that once Black became a 100 sequence member, even if he couldn't become a Radiance envoy, he would at least become a member of the Radiance Knights. Li Nao wasn't qualified to see the strength of Black's disciple. However, Li Nao felt that the 3 techniques that Black had displayed, no matter which technique it was, it should have reached the standard of Black's disciple. His limbs had completely recovered, and Li Nao quickly stood up. He thanked Black in a solemn manner. Then, he looked down at his spirit chi clothing that had basically become tattered cloth. Fortunately, he was wearing a waist armor made of metal spiritual materials. Otherwise, he would have really lost his composure. Li Nao thought that they were both guys, and there was nothing to be shy about. After all, Li Nao had been to public bathhouses frequently. Just as Li Nao was about to change his clothes, he realized something. The yellow sand under his feet surged, and a fitting room was built for him. Li Nao didn't expect Black to be so thoughtful. At this moment, Li Nao suddenly remembered. Black seemed to be rumored to be a spirit chi professional that wasn't even 20 years old. Now that he was in close contact with Black, Li Nao could faintly feel Black's youthful aura. Li Nao thanked Black again. He took the blue and white spirit chi clothing that Black had given him and entered the fitting room that was made of yellow sand. Li Nao knew that Black had dragged him into the yellow sand castle. It was because Black wanted to protect him. He wanted him to enter the Radiance 100 sequence like Gao Feng back then. Li Nao was very grateful for this. It could be said that Black had casually given him an opportunity. During this year, he had worked hard to increase his strength. Then, he had nurtured the new contracted Fae. Chapter 1684. 1 year later, he wouldn't still be in the bottom 10 of the 100 sequence. This time, he would be ranked so low. It was mainly because Li Nao wanted to rush up at the last moment but didn't succeed. In a situation where the ranking didn't change, he was targeted. Thus, this situation was created. Li Nao was grateful to Black, but Lin Yuan didn't think so much. Lin Yuan watched the assessment for 2 days in the Yellow Sand Castle. There were at least 50 candidates in the assessment of the 100 sequence. They were all qualified to compete for the top 100 sequence. Lin Yuan didn't want to interfere too much with this. He wanted to let these 50 candidates compete freely. After all, the quota was limited. These 50 candidates with acceptable qualities needed to compete with each other to determine who was stronger. Those who passed the assessment in terms of willpower, belief, quality, communication ability, and other aspects. The final competition still had to return to strength. Li Nao's ability in all aspects was obviously much higher than these candidates. As for the other candidates who were in the top 100, in terms of leadership, they were the best. They were far inferior to Li Nao. Moreover, at least 4 of the top 100 sequence members had already started to conserve their spiritual power on the 3rd day. They were converging toward the core region. It was obvious that the 4 of them had the intention to join forces. This was an extremely rational choice, and it wasn't wrong. However, Li Nao's emotions weren't wrong either. In Lin Yuan's opinion, Li Nao, he was qualified to be a 100 sequence member. Therefore, Lin Yuan made a move without any hesitation. Lin Yuan's action made Iron Prison, who was on the 12 stone pillars, frown. Moon Empress, your disciple's action is equivalent to deciding on Li Nao. This kind of action is too unfair to the other candidates. When Cicada Cry heard Iron Prison's words, he couldn't help but hold his forehead. This Iron Prison was obviously willing to consume his lifespan for the Moon Empress. But why did he choose words that others weren't willing to listen to when he spoke? When Tianfeng heard Iron Prison's words, he kept the 2 peanuts in his hands and said, "Iron Prison, anyone with a discerning eye can see that in the entire assessment, apart from the Moon Empress disciple and Cicada Cry's disciple, Li Nao's performance is the most outstanding, and his Fays have the greatest potential. In the entire assessment, there is no such thing as fairness or unfairness. Now, for members of the top 100 sequence in the core region have joined forces. Is it fair to the other candidates? To put it bluntly, there are no external factors in this assessment. It's a test of personal strength. Black is using his own strength to protect Li Nao. In my opinion, there is nothing wrong with that. On the contrary, Black's behavior, in my opinion, is a leadership of a higher level than Li Nao. Black is screening talents for radiance. Tai Yu, I think you should accept a disciple. After having a disciple, your way of thinking and thinking will change. Your spirit items are all dragon type. Coiling Dragon Valley's old patriarch has successfully become an undying. It will take over Whale Ocean Trade's original position in Radiance. Long Dao is very suitable to be your disciple. When I was studying the Coiled Dragon Valley, I also studied Long Dao. Long Dao is the same as you. Both of you are eccentric. When he grows up, he will definitely be a hermaphrodite. Hearing Tianfeng's words, Iron Prison's face darkened. You're the eccentric one. You're the eccentric one. However, Tianfeng's words still touched Iron Prison. Recently, his disagreement with the Moon Empress, Night-Leaning Moon, Chef Supreme, and the others in the Imperial Court Council had become more and more serious. Even the Cicada's Cries often disagreed with his opinions. Could this be because the 3 of them accepted disciples? Iron Prison looked at the silver stone pillar beside him. His gaze landed on Long Dao, who was sandwiched between Liu Jie and Xia Qing. After looking at Long Dao for a long time, Iron Prison turned his head. Then, he focused his eyes and pondered. No one knew what he was thinking in his heart. At this moment, The star web was also in an uproar because of Black's operation. However, unlike the unfair argument that Iron Prison made, the star web was unanimously favorable. Dusty love for the past. When Lee Nao was about to be pierced by the horned demon, I cried. But why did Lee Nao fall into the quicksand? Black can't be giving Lee Nao the final blow, right? You chissy, hey, what are you thinking about? If Black wants to give Lee Nao the final blow, he can just make the yellow sand boil again. Except for those who can fly, everyone will go underground. Moreover, the yellow sand castle can rise into the air, which means that Black's sand attribute source-type lifeform has a certain ability to stay in the air. Black obviously saved Lee Nao. Tai Chi Guzheng, my son saved my new husband. Now that's touching. Is Lee Nao in the yellow sand castle now? Yu Sheng, Black did a great job. I was only a passerby fan of Black before, but now I'm a fan of Black. Rascal Rabbit 88, except for Black and Gao Feng, among everyone present, no one is more suitable to become a member of the 100 sequence than Lee Nao. I admit that I didn't think highly of Lee Nao at the beginning, but Lee Nao's contribution to the team made me unable to ignore him. It could be said that these people who were watching the 100 sequence selection, most of them had heroism. At the same time, after watching this assessment for 3 days, everyone had poured their emotions into it. It was like watching a TV series. After watching it, no one wanted the main character to die. It was different from the enthusiastic atmosphere on the star web. At this moment, in the central area of the assessment space, the final stage of the battle was being carried out. Gao Feng was no longer restoring spirit chi for others. While the 2 spirit spring lilies were constantly restoring spirit chi for Gao Feng, the breeze hibiscus was using its normal skill, guard breeze. Around the high wind, a wind belt was formed that completely blocked the high wind. The breeze hibiscus was a Diamond X Fantasy V-Fey after all. The guard breeze belt didn't have any offensive ability, but any elemental attacks that hit the wind belt would be blown away. The compressed wind elements would be blown away. If someone attacked Gao Feng at close range, if someone attacked the wind belt, they would be immediately blown away by the wind belt. At present, the exotic beast swarm had shrunk the central area to less than 300 square meters. There were less than 100 people who were still fighting. Among them, there were a few candidates who attacked Gao Feng. The wind that was guarding Gao Feng was blown away by nearly 500 meters. They fell into the beast tide. They became delicious food sent to the alien insects and devils. Gao Feng picked up the 2 spirit spring lilies and the breeze hibiscus from the ground and walked toward the center. Those who saw Gao Feng had a tacit understanding to avoid him. The 400 sequence members who teamed up earlier. He watched as Gao Feng stood in the center. The 4 of them thought for a moment and simply guarded around Gao Feng. They occupied the most advantageous position. Chapter 1685. The current Gao Feng was clearly saying that he wouldn't attack anyone else. The rest of you don't have to fight with me. Gao Feng, who was standing in the middle of the exam, was like a starting point. The 400 sequence members used this spot as the center and entrusted their backs to each other. Everyone faced one side and used their phase to defend. At that moment, the 4 former 100 sequence members' phase drew a line not far in front. The meaning was obvious. If anyone crossed this line, they would be attacked by 4 members of the top 100 sequence. In these 3 days of hard work, the few remaining members of the 100 sequence had revealed their full strength. Each of them had a platinum fantasy breed Fey. And there was more than one. It could be said that these 100 sequence members, they were the top of the candidates in terms of combat power. Now that they were using their Feys to defend with all their might, no one dared to cross that line. Once they crossed this line, they would be attacked by the platinum fantasy breed Feys. If everyone attacked together, it would be fine. If one of them stepped forward, they would be hit. They could basically bid farewell to the 100 sequence exam. Right now, the remaining 100 people felt that they had a chance to be selected into the 100 sequence. Once they became a 100 sequence member, not only would they bring glory to their family, but they would also be able to hold their heads high. They would also be able to bring an excellent future to themselves. Once they became a 100 sequence member, the resources they obtained would be completely different from the past. According to the management, within a year of becoming a Radiance 100 sequence member, the Radiance Sacred Hall would pour in at least $50 million Radiance dollars. This amount of resources would allow them to obtain a Bronze Epic Fae. They would also be able to upgrade this Bronze Epic Fae into a Platinum Fantasy breed. Of course, there was a prerequisite. He needed to comprehend a willpower rune himself. Comprehending a willpower rune was a difficult problem for most people. However, it was not difficult for the 140 people present. In fact, many of them already had comprehended a willpower rune in their minds. However, there were no suitable high-quality bronze phase. Becoming a Radiance 100 sequence member was a way to rise to the top. They had fought until now, and no one was willing to give up. Lee Nao had already changed his clothes and walked out of the yellow sand fitting room. He arrived in front of Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan was watching the dispute in the camp through the window of the yellow sand castle. Lee Nao walked to Lin Yuan's side and stood side by side with him. Lin Yuan had already stored Lee Nao in the yellow sand castle. He had already stored Red Thorn into the spirit lock spatial zone. Otherwise, Lee Nao would be staring blankly at Red Thorn, who had not advanced to the mythical stage but had 3 pairs of wings. He would not be able to analyze the situation in the battlefield. Black, no one can break through the wind wall that Gao Feng used in the central region. Gao will be able to obtain a spot. Zhongzi Hao, Du Shu, and Shu will be able to be stronger than the rest. The 4 of them have the geographical advantage. Therefore, I should be able to obtain 4 spots. Including you and me, there are only 3 spots left for the entire assessment. Li have Li Feng. 3 to 5 years, apart from Black and Gao Feng, Li Nao, Zhongzi Hao, Du Shu, and the other 5 former Radiance 100 sequence members should be able to snatch a seat. How are the rest going to fight for the remaining 3 seats? The competition is too intense. A young man with a dream, I think so too. In terms of individual strength, Gao Feng, Zhongzi Hao, and Du Shu can be considered the strongest 5 in the core region. A few of them are similar to Du Shu and Zhongzi Hao, but if they want to rush to the center region, they will be targeted by the other 4 and will be immediately eliminated. Zhongzi Hao, Du Shu, and the others are the first to join forces in the core region. What a good plan. Happy Water Source, Du Shu and Feng Tsung's Fei abilities are too limited. Feng Tsung's poison-type Fei controls a slow-acting poison. It has area of effect, but it takes too long and is not good at defense. Du Shu's main Fei, the blade-armored tyrant crocodile, has low intelligence. Once it enters a berserk state, it will not listen to Du Shu's commands. Compared to the others, I think Du Shu and Feng Tsung are not qualified. Lin Yuan's thoughts were completely different from Li Nao's. He stored Red Thorn into the Spirit Lock spatial zone. The 8 long ribbons of the flower sea in the insect tide had already become rootless sources. The sea of flowers could be adjusted by devouring the alien insects. However, without the energy supply, the sea of flowers would soon be washed away by the insect tide. By then, the pressure in the core region would multiply. Everyone would stake it all and want to occupy a position in the core region. At that time, let alone Zhongzi Hao, Du Shu, and the other top 100 sequence members. Even if Lin Yuan went down alone, he would definitely be targeted by everyone. In fact, he might not even have to wait for the 8 flower belts to collapse. The defense formed by the 4 of them would be targeted and attacked by the other examinees. In less than 10 minutes, a voice suddenly echoed in the camp. The alien beast tide has become more ferocious than before. According to my phase observation, half of the 8 flower belts have been devoured by the alien insects. Soon, the pressure on us will increase greatly. If we don't go to the core region, everyone will be eliminated. Instead of being eliminated just like that, everyone might as well fight for it. This statement immediately stirred up the emotions of the examinees present. There were only over 80 people left now. Instead of fighting for those 3 positions, it was better to drag the 4 top 100 sequence members into the water. Everyone would fight for 7 positions together. At that moment, someone shouted again. In the previous 100 sequence selections, there were only a total of 3 or 4 top 100 sequence members who were selected. But this time, if we let 5 of them return to the ranks of the 100 sequence, doesn't that mean that our batch of newcomers is not strong enough? This is so shameful. These two voices made the expressions of Zhong Zihao, Du Shu, Feng Tsong, and the others darken. It was obvious that someone wanted to target them and the others. They also knew how to win people's hearts. They borrowed the strength of the group. Before they could speak, many examinees had already used their phase to cross the originally drawn line. They launched an attack on them and the others. Among them, 100 Poison's Feng Tsong, who was ranked 96th in the top 100 sequence, was the most miserable. The main Fey, the blood poison dragon centipede, sprayed all of its poisonous mist. However, these examinees were not afraid of it at all. The blood poison dragon centipede's poison acted on blood. After being infected by the poison for a period of time, the blood would coagulate. The life forms would die from blood coagulation. Chapter 1686. When they were fighting against the mutated beast horde, Feng Kang's group was very strong. There was no need for other combat class spirit chi professionals in Feng Tsong's area. Feng Tsong led a group of defense-type spirit chi professionals and let the blood-venomous drake release poisonous fog in a large area. It infected all the insects and demons in the area. Then, the defense-type spirit chi professionals blocked the attack of the insect horde. In 3 minutes, the insects and demons would die from blood coagulation. If it was before, the candidates would be very afraid of Feng Tsong. But now, there were only 70 to 80 people left. Not to mention 3 minutes, the battle would end in 2 minutes. No matter how strong Zhong Zihao, Feng Tsong, and the others were, they couldn't fight against so many. Under the group attack of the phase, only Zhong Zihao was strong enough to block the attack. Of the other 3, 2 were directly eliminated. One was beaten until he didn't even have the strength to get up. Soon, he was finished off by someone else. Zhong Zihao saw that the others still wanted to attack him, so he immediately shouted, "Thorny silk white vine, burn your vitality and form a vine net here." Hearing Zhong Zihao's command, the vines around Zhao Zihao suddenly grew crazily with Zhong Zihao as the core. The vines bound each other. They formed a vine pile about 20 meters tall. Zhong Zihao was a defense-type spirit chi professional. Using the thorny silk white vine to cast the vine entanglement was Zhong Zihao's strongest defensive ability. Zhong Zihao was sure that everyone didn't have much spirit chi left. Without 5 minutes, they wouldn't be able to break through this 4-meter-thick vine. He summoned himself from these vines. It could be said that he had used this move. Zhong Zihao was 100% sure that he could get a spot in the sequence of 100. When the others saw this, they quickly filled the remaining 3 spots beside Gao Feng. No one thought of attacking Gao Feng. Previously, when the skills were thrown at Zhao Zihao, Feng Tsong, Du Shu, and the others, Gao Feng was in the middle of these people. When these people were dodging, it could be said that Gao Feng was the one who was attacked the most. The air current around Gao Feng blocked all the elemental skills and blasted them back, injuring many examinees. Some unlucky candidates were directly killed by the skills that were bounced back. Therefore, in the face of such a powerful Gao Feng, no one was willing to look for trouble. When the candidates in the core area were fighting, the examinees in the outer circle were waiting for the people in the middle to fight. He would then step forward and reap the benefits of the fisherman. However, a sudden change occurred. These examinees didn't even have time to react. Then, they were devoured by the beast tide. For some reason, the beast tide suddenly became several times more ferocious than before. It was as if there was something behind those exotic beasts that was pushing them forward. He looked at the exotic beast that was about to crash into him. One of the female examinees who was covered in mud hugged her broken arm. He said to his heavily injured main Fey, "Iron Baboon, throw me into the air shield next to Gao Feng in the central area." The Iron Baboon had just thrown the woman out when it was devoured by the beast tide. The woman made a beautiful parabola and smashed into the air shield beside Gao Feng. It directly collided with the air shield. At this moment, the woman felt as if her internal organs were on fire. In the Star Web duel, a function of 100% pain was introduced. This time, in the sequence of 100 assessment, the pain function was also used. Therefore, even if she suffered a small injury in the star web space, the feeling of being injured was exactly the same as in the outside world. After the woman collided with the air shield, she was thrown out by the air shield. Just as the woman was about to smash into the beast tide, the woman was suddenly teleported out of the assessment space. At this moment, the examinees standing in the Radiant Sacred Hall opened their eyes. They realized that they had already returned to the real world. They knew that the Radiance 100 sequence assessment was completely over. At this moment, there was a sudden cheer from the crowd. The person who let out this cheer was the woman who was about to smash into the beast tide. I didn't die, but the assessment was over. This meant that I had been selected as a member of the sequence of 100. After the examinees were eliminated, they still had to observe the assessment. Therefore, the examinees were very clear about everyone's performance. The examinees subconsciously looked around. They wanted to see if there were any experts around them who had performed extremely well in the assessment. Lin Yuan and Gao Feng stood together, and they were quickly discovered by the people around them. When they saw the mask on Lin Yuan's face, these examinees were slightly stunned. It turned out that the fake fan that they thought was Lin Yuan was actually Lin Yuan himself. These examinees immediately felt that Lin Yuan was actually Lin Yuan. However, they immediately became excited. Their eyes kept looking at Lin Yuan and Gao Feng. Gao Feng was only famous because of this assessment. However, Lin Yuan's fame wasn't just that. Long before he participated in the sequence of 100, Lin Yuan had already shown signs of being the most popular person among the younger generation on Star Web. He could almost be considered the leader of the younger generation. This was the first time Lin Yuan had appeared in reality. If this wasn't the Radiant's Sacred Hall, envoys from the two major federations were observing the ceremony, and the Supremes were watching from above. Many people would probably want to ask Lin Yuan for his autograph. Li Nai, Zhong Zihao, and the other 11 members of the sequence of 100 stood together. At this moment, only Li Nai and Zhong Zihao had smiles on their faces. This was because only Li Nai and Zhong Zihao could return to the sequence of 100. They had protected the glory of being a member of the sequence of 100. The other members of the sequence of 100 felt a little upset. However, there was nothing to be upset about in such an assessment. At this moment, Liu Wencheng's voice sounded from the golden stone pillar. This assessment of the sequence of 100 is officially over. Next, the last 10 people of the assessment will mount the jade red cranes and ascend the silver stone pillar. Liu Wencheng's words caused the examinees to hold their breaths involuntarily. 10 giant feathered cranes with cinnabar on their heads, golden feathers on their bodies, jade patterns on their backs, and a jade ruyi in their mouths. They flapped their wings and flew toward the square formation where the candidates were. Then, they flew separately to a position in the square formation. They accurately landed in front of the last 10 candidates. They looked at the jade red cranes that were crawling in front of them. Lin Yuan and Gao Feng raised their feet and used the crane's wings to ascend onto the back of the jade red cranes. After Lin Yuan and Gao Feng stabilized themselves, the jade red cranes flapped their wings and flew away. They flew toward the silver stone pillar. According to their performance in the assessment space, the jade red cranes automatically stopped beside the silver stone pillar where they should stop. Lin Yuan looked at the 9 empty golden stone pillars on his left side. He stood on the stone pillar that represented the Radiance 100 sequence's 91st position. Lin Yuan stood on the silver stone pillar and looked through the silver mask. He looked in the direction of the Freedom Federation's envoys and thought to himself. The appetizer was over, and the real collision was about to begin. Chapter 1687. Beside Lin Yuan was Gao Feng. Gao Feng landed on the 92nd stone pillar of the Radiance 100 sequence. It was followed by Li Nao and Zhong Zihao. The last one was the 100th member of the Radiance 100 sequence. It was the air shield that had been thrown by the iron skin baboon toward Gao Feng. She was bounced back by the air shield and fell toward the girl in the insect tide. It was the time when she bounced back and forth in the air that allowed her to enter the 100th rank of the Radiance 100 sequence. The new 1000 sequence members climbed up the stone pillars. The silver stone pillars were finally filled with the younger generation prodigies of the Radiance 100 sequence. Those candidates who had failed due to various reasons. Looking at the 100 figures on the golden stone pillars, they might be depressed. But they couldn't help but applaud sincerely. Among them, Li Nao and Zhong Zihao looked at each other. As a member who had participated in 200 sequence selections, the last round of the arena battles would determine the final 10 people. It was rare to get the sincere recognition of the same batch of candidates. This was because Spirit Chi professionals' talents restrained each other. If they could find a suitable target, there were too many precedents of the weak defeating the strong. Many people felt that if they could meet an opponent that restrained them, they would have the chance to advance all the way to the 100 sequence. To become a 100 sequence member. And now, in this kind of assessment in such a large environment, everyone did their best. In these 3 days, everyone no longer checked and balanced each other but cooperated. After spending 3 days together, the examinees were truly impressed by the 10 members of the 100 sequence that had been selected. Even Yu Tiantian, who had relied on luck to become the 100th 100 sequence member. She also stood at the very end. Yu Tiantian's combat ability was slightly weaker than the other candidates. But wasn't it Yu Tiantian's plan to let the iron skin baboon throw her into the sky? At this moment, the Star Web was filled with cheers. The Star Web reporters who had been watching the entire assessment. While he was watching, he had already finished writing his script. As soon as the assessment ended, he filled in the order of the 100 sequence members and sent the manuscript out. These posts from the Star Web reporters quickly occupied all the major forums and Tiebar. However, at this moment of cheering, not many people went to read this first-hand information. This was because everyone who was able to log onto the Star Web was someone who had personally experienced the 100 sequence assessment. With his eyes, he saw through the entire process of the test. There was really no need to understand the situation of the test through the Star Web reporter's post. Originally, Lu Shuang and Poison Beauty were still lamenting about the live broadcast. Because of Black, he did not show his face in the yellow sand castle. As a result, the number of viewers in his live streaming room was not as many as he had imagined. In the meantime, Lu Shuang and Poison Beauty switched to Li Nao's and Gao Feng's perspectives. However, after the assessment ended, the popularity of Li Nao and Poison Beauty's live streaming room instantly exploded. The viewers who were watching Li Nao and Poison Beauty's live streaming were waiting to see the Black angle from the beginning. After Black became the 91st of the 100 sequence, he returned to the live stream that he had been waiting for. A heated discussion ensued. Hui Bulai, I said before that Black will definitely be selected into the Radiance 100 sequence. I was right to come here and poke my eyes. Deranged, Black can become a member of the 100 sequence. Is there a need for you to say that? Anyone with a discerning eye could tell. Black awesome. Not only did he become a member of the 100 sequence, but he also brought 2 people with him. Monsieur, please. Gao Feng doesn't need to be a black belt at all. If Gao Feng didn't wait for Black at the beginning and rushed to the central area, he wouldn't have been the first to encounter the beast tide. If Li Nao had a bit of selfishness, he wouldn't have been in such a difficult situation. Tai Chi Guzheng, no matter what, Black and Gao Feng are stronger than the rest. They are not on the same level as Li Nao and Zhong Zihao, who are ranked 93rd and 94th. Shun Wuyue won. There is no need to trample on them. Everyone is a top genius of the Radiance 100's younger generation. I am very curious now. What will Black's title be? The titles of the Radiance 100 sequence members were not decided by themselves at the beginning. It was the Star Web's netizens who came up with the titles on the Radiance Sacred Halls forum. Hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of titles were displayed in the Radiance Sacred Halls forum for every 100 sequence member. After 48 hours, the title with the most votes would be obtained. This was the initial title of the 100 sequence members. Of course, if the 100 sequence members were not satisfied, they could make changes. Just like Zhao Xiaochun back then, because she was in the 100-sequence selection, she had been eating non-stop. One moment, she was eating pig trotters, the next moment, she was eating drumsticks. After a match, she could eat 3 pig trotters. She could eat 5 drumsticks. Therefore, she was voted to obtain the title of gluttony. As a result, when Zhao Xiaochun found out about her title, the next day, she applied to the Radiance Sacred Hall's officials. She changed gluttony to anorexia. Although the Star Web's official title had changed, when Zhao Xiaochun was mentioned. In the memories of ordinary people, Zhao Xiaochun's title was still gluttony, not anorexia. Chu Ci was in the return from faraway manor, sitting with the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer. Through the star web, she was watching Lin Yuan, who was standing on the silver stone pillar. Chu Ci felt that these 10 months were like a dream. 10 months ago, Lin Yuan was still a thin and weak youth who could barely maintain a small fei store. Back then, Lin Yuan had done his best to maintain a living. He had worked hard to save up for his tuition fees. He had thought of the very least. He had to provide for his Spirit Chi Professional University. Chu Ci had helped others write workbooks in school. She had tried her best to think of how to earn more money to buy more medicine for Lin Yuan. However, ever since Lin Yuan had come to visit her at school, after he had given her a bronze sharp iron hornball, everything had changed. Chu Ci did not know how Lin Yuan had become a creation master and how he had obtained so many precious resources for her. She did not know how Lin Yuan, who did not even have the talent to become a Spirit Chi professional, had made it into the 100 sequence. However, Chu Ci knew that along the way, her brother, Lin Yuan, must have suffered a lot. Looking at Lin Yuan, Chu Ci's eyes could not help but turn red. Her heart was filled with pride and pride. Apart from Chu Ci, no one in this world knew how difficult it had been for Lin Yuan in the past. Lin Yuan had become a 100-sequence member. The mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer might be happy for Lin Yuan. However, they did not feel anything else. In the eyes of the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer, Lin Yuan should be standing in this position. If not for the fact that he was a new 100-sequence member, he would not be ranked before 90th. Lin Yuan could compete with Liu Jie for the first position. Liu Jie turned to look at where Lin Yuan was. In a sense, Liu Jie was now. He was standing in the same row as Lin Yuan. End of this chapter. Chapter 1688. Next, he might even fight alongside Lin Yuan. Thinking of this, Liu Jie's serious face revealed a trace of throbbing emotions. This palpitation was the pleasant surprise of being able to fight alongside Lin Yuan. Secondly, Liu Jie had just received feedback from the Insect Queen. The Blade Queen Bee was showing signs of metamorphosis. The Blade Queen Bee had already comprehended the willpower rune when it had just fused with the source-type item Cocoon Demon Embryo. Between the Insect Queen and the Blade Queen Bee, the Insect Queen was only controlled by the mental poison. Therefore, the Blade Queen Bee's level was not suppressed. In other words, as long as the Insect Queen allowed the Blade Queen Bee to evolve as an insect-type carcinoma Fae, the Blade Queen Bee would attract a special world cleansing. It would then become a myth-breed insect-type carcinoma Fae. Under the effect of the Cocoon Demon Embryo, she became a demon. Letting the Blade Queen Bee evolve on the spot was indeed risky. However, this method would also increase their chances of winning. A Diamond X Legend Blade Queen Bee compared to a Diamond X Fantasy V Blade Queen Bee. The difference was like heaven and earth. A Diamond X Fantasy V Blade Queen Bee was compared to a Suzerain Myth I Blade Queen Bee. There will be an even bigger gap. In the information that Hui Yarrow had collected, there was no precedent of an insect-type carcinoma Fae transforming into a demon spirit. However, Liu Jie had heard Lin Yuan mention it before. When a carcinoma Fae transformed into a demonic spirit, the number of wings wouldn't be small. Lin Yuan had said that because he had fused the plant-type carcinoma Fae, the sea burial lotus flower, with the source-type fairy's heart, it allowed the sea burial lotus flower to transform into a demon. After the sea burial lotus flower transformed into a demon, it had 3 pairs of wings and was now a 6-winged demon. The sea burial lotus flower was able to achieve such a transformation. Firstly, it was related to the pure spirit chi in the spirit lock spatial zone. Secondly, it was related to the coral jades with insect patterns. It was the coral jade that had allowed the sea burial lotus flower's bloodline to evolve. The blade queen bee did not have pure spirit chi, nor did it have anything that could help its bloodline evolve. However, after the transformation, it would probably reach the level of a four-winged demon. Once the 12 cocoon demon embryos were all used by him. The insect queen, who had just become a six-winged demon, was leading 12 four-winged demons. Following the transformation of the insect-type carcinoma Fae into a demon, his bloodline had been continuously enhanced. Liu Jie felt that as long as he kept working hard, there was a chance to keep up with Lin Yuan's footsteps. At this time, within the Freedom Federation's diplomatic mission, Li Yang looked at Lian Shun, who was sitting beside him, and said, "Pity Goddess, our Freedom Federation's envoy will be challenging the Radiance Federation's 10 new 100 sequence members. At the same time, pull down a few disciples of His Holiness Hui Yao." I do not know. Before Li Yang could finish speaking, he was interrupted by the pity god. "You are in charge of these things, so you don't need to tell me. As long as nothing goes wrong with Chen Yu, I don't care about anything else." It could be said that the goddess of pity would come here. It was all because of Chen Yu. When Goddess Lian received news about Chen Yu, she was afraid that Chen Yu would be in danger. Otherwise, with Goddess Lian's troublesome personality, she would not have made this trip. Wasn't swimming in the cold pool water mirror behind the Freedom Temple more interesting than coming to the Radiance 100 sequence to watch the Radiance 100 sequence test? Chen Yu was seen by the pity goddess as her future. She would not object to Chen Yu's participation. However, if Chen Yu was in danger, she would not have any scruples. She would definitely make a move and save Chen Yu. She would ascend to the god position and evolve her sacred source lifeform to 11-star. As long as she could remove the curse, she would be qualified to peak at a higher path. Li Yang was a little displeased when he was interrupted by the pity goddess. But he didn't say anything unnecessary. It was as though Li Yang was used to the pity goddess interrupting him. Now that the pity goddess did not care, Li Yang decided to act according to his original plan. Li Yang said to Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian, "The three of you, get ready first." Li Yang then looked at Chen Yu and said, "I hope you can follow the original plan and pull down Liu Yifan. Then, apart from Gao Feng, pull down one or two more disciples of His Holiness Hui Yao. You decide for yourself what you should do. If you can pull down Liu Yifan, apart from Gao Feng, pull down two more disciples of His Holiness Hui Yao. After this, I can give you a 7-star artifact that you can use in my name. If you don't pull down Liu Yifan, apart from Gao Feng, you can pull down 3 of His Holiness Hui Yao's disciples. I can also give you that 7-star artifact." As Li Yang spoke, he looked at Black, who was standing at Radiance 100 sequence number 91. Li Yang did not know who Black was. However, in Li Yang's opinion, Black's strength had reached the standard of His Holiness Hui Yao's disciples. Chen Yu heard this and was moved. Previously, Chen Yu had been in a life-and-death situation several times. Every time, Her Holiness Goddess Pity, who cared for him, would save him. In the Freedom Federation, Chen Yu was a freedom envoy. He had learned to ensure his own interests before doing anything. The best way to ensure his own interests was to be able to participate in this competition. Obtain Li Yang's promise of a 7-star artifact. Chen Yu actually did not want to pull down Liu Yifan. This was because Chen Yu had fought with Liu Yifan before. He knew Liu Yifan's strength, especially Liu Yifan's troublesome desolation bloodline Fei. Therefore, compared to pulling down Liu Yifan, Chen Yu was more willing to pull down 3 more of His Holiness Hui Yao's disciples. However, Chen Yu was clear in his heart. If he went up, he would be the Freedom Federation's freedom envoy. His target would be Liu Yifan, who was also a Radiance envoy. If he proposed to challenge Liu Yifan, the Radiance faction could only agree because of their reputation. However, he wanted to challenge His Holiness Hui Yao's younger generation disciples. He was 3 to 4 years older than His Holiness Hui Yao. Furthermore, his Fei had been promoted to myth breed. If the Radiance faction agreed, it would be no different from sending His Holiness Hui Yao's disciples to their deaths. As a genius of the younger generation, 3 years was a huge gap. His Holiness Li Yang might have given him 2 choices, but only the first one could be chosen. Before making his choice, Qian Yu looked at Her Holiness Goddess Pity, who cared for him, and asked, "Teacher, I would like to ask you to help me see Black's age. How old is he exactly?" Hearing this, Her Holiness Goddess said directly, "Black's age cannot be more than 19. Hearing Her Holiness Goddess's words, the worry in Qian Yu's heart instantly disappeared. He took a step forward and said in a clear voice, "The younger generation of the Radiant's Hui Yarrow clan is indeed full of talent. While the Freedom Federation's envoy is here to observe the ceremony, we would like to have a friendly match with the newly selected 100 sequence members of the Radiant's Hui Yarrow clan." End of this chapter. Chapter 1689. Qian Yu had always felt that he couldn't see through the darkness. In other words, although Black had used a shocking method in the assessment, he was still able to defeat Black. However, the information that was revealed was too little. If Black's true age was stuck at the upper age limit of the Radiant's 100 sequence like 28 or 29, in that case, Qian Yu would have to consider it carefully. 28 or 29 years old, which was even older than him. If Hui Yarrow had really arranged it, it was highly likely that he had rashly pulled down Liu Yifan and the 2 disciples of His Holiness. Liu Yifan, the 2 disciples of His Holiness, Gao Feng, and Black worked together against himself, Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian. It wouldn't be good if his side flipped over. Qian Yu knew that Her Holiness the Goddess of Pity was looking after him. He had already grasped his life providence. Experts who had grasped fate could tell the age of other life forms at a glance. That was the reason why Qian Yu had made such a decision before the competition. He wanted Goddess Lian to help him look at Black's age. After learning that Black was not even 19 years old, Qian Yu no longer took Black seriously. As a 19-year-old spirit chi professional, no matter how talented he was still a genius. How strong could he be? Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian could become His Majesty's caretakers. Among the members of the independent 100 sequence, which one of them was not a genius? Qian Yu was hesitant at first. At this moment, Qian Yu was ready to drag Liu Yifan down without any scruples. And 2 of His Holiness disciples. His side's advantage lay in Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian's sacred source lifeforms. Sacred source lifeforms needed to be able to link with each other. It was not an easy task. This was the first time in the Freedom Federation's history that 3 sacred source lifeforms were able to interact with one another. After all, the number of sacred source lifeforms was too small. Unlike source-type items, most King Stage powerhouses could easily obtain them with their own strength. The Radiance Federation had unique Desolate Bloodline phase. In the Freedom Federation, every single person favored by His Holiness had a contract with a demon from the Devil's Church. The uniqueness of a Desolate Bloodline Fae was that it could control a certain power of nature. It was similar to the spirit of heavenly favor. However, in terms of growth, it did not rely on the heavens and earth like the chosen spirits. Instead, it had to be cultivated artificially. They were creatures that were extremely compatible with nature. As for the Freedom Federation, the demons that originated from the Devil's Church possessed ominous powers. He focused on strengthening his physical body and soul. Ghosts that had strengthened their bodies had powerful combat techniques, as well as all kinds of strange abilities. It was a monster that focused on the soul. It was good at seducing people, attacking their minds, and causing them to fall. It was impossible to guard against. The people from the other federations talked about the Radiance Federation's Desolate Bloodline phase and the Freedom Federation's monsters. Perhaps he was more afraid of the Freedom Federation's ghosts and monsters. The aura released by a Desolate Bloodline Fae would affect lifeforms of the same attribute or similar laws. It had an extremely strong suppressive force. This kind of suppression was still within the range of human understanding. However, the monster's ferocious appearance and ominous aura emanating from its body made Lin Fan feel uneasy. It gave people goosebumps. Upon hearing Qian Yu's words, the examinees present, the members of the 100 sequence on the silver stone pillars, and the viewers on StarWeb were all stunned. It instantly boiled over. The examinees at the venue and the star web audience, his thoughts were not much different. He was looking forward to the friendly match proposed by Freedom Envoy Chen Yu, who was leading the Freedom Federation's diplomatic mission. He wanted to see which side was stronger, the Radiance Federation's geniuses or the Freedom Federation's geniuses. It could be said that in the hearts of these examinees and the star web audience, they all had a sense of honor and mission. There was an intense discussion on Star Web. Deep Mountain Old Lee, I originally wanted to go to the Radiance Sacred Hall's newly established Black's personal page and enter the title that I thought of. I was just about to leave the live streaming room, but I didn't expect to see the friendly match proposed by the Freedom Federation. Clarity. Go Radiance Federation. Kill them. Nicholas Zhongqi. According to the rules of the other federations who came to the Radiance Federation to watch the ceremony in the past few years, those who participated in the friendly match were all new members of the 100 sequence. The people sent by the Freedom Federation's diplomatic mission will definitely be stronger. This time, Black should be able to reveal more phase. Mountain River Spirit, I'm looking forward to the match later. Since it's a friendly match, if it's based on friendship, both sides shouldn't use any killer moves, right? Amber Button, impossible. The bet between the Freedom Federation and the Radiance Federation is full of the smell of gunpowder. I bet $5 Radiance that this match might be under the guise of a friendly match, but the real situation is definitely not that simple. The Star Web's netizens and examinees were looking forward to the match. It was because these people didn't think very far. Those veteran factions and the members of the top factions who were paying attention to the current situation all knew. After the 100 sequence ended, the Freedom Federation's diplomatic mission had revealed its claws. They were ready to make a move on the Radiance Federation. This match was of great importance. These people's eyes were focused on Black, Gao Feng, Li Nao, Zhong Zihao, and the others. Their fists were clenched tightly. At such a time, the two major federations had to wrestle with the strength of the younger generation. Under normal circumstances, winning or losing wasn't that important. After all, the duel wasn't between the current Radiance envoys or Freedom envoys. However, the Freedom Federation's diplomatic mission had proposed the match in the Radiance Federation's royal capital. It was also carried out when the Radiance 100 selection had just ended and everyone was watching. If the Radiance Federation lost this match, to the entire Radiance Federation, it would have a huge impact. Apart from Liu Jie, Xia Qing, and Gao Feng, the 100 sequence members who were standing on the silver stone pillar, the others furrowed their brows. Liu Jie, Xia Qing, Lin Yuan, and Gao Feng already knew that this conflict was bound to happen. Long Dao was from the Coiled Dragon Valley, a top faction. Among the 100 sequence, half of them were members of the top factions and veteran factions. These people had previously guessed that the Freedom Federation's diplomatic mission would make a move after the 100 sequence selection ended. But guesses were just guesses. When the real situation happened, these people couldn't help but feel their hearts in their throats. As members of the 100 sequence, everyone held on to the Radiance Federation's consciousness in their hearts. Therefore, these people knew that the friendly match proposed by the Freedom Federation could only be won and not lost. Even if they had to risk their lives, they had to protect the Radiance Federation's glory. Chen Yu's eyes were looking straight at the 13 supremacies who were standing on the golden stone pillar. He seemed to be waiting for the 13 supremacies to give him a response. However, the 13 supremacies didn't have the intention to bother with Chen Yu. At that moment, Liu Yifan, who was standing on the 7-colored stone pillar, spoke in a clear voice. The Radiance Federation will accept the Freedom Federation's challenge. The rules of the challenge have always been set by the party that issued the challenge. How do you want to compete? Your Freedom Federation can just say it. Chapter 1690. Liu Yifan was originally in seclusion in the desolate mystic realm. He was preparing to participate in the 10,000 States Convention for the last time in 2 years. The 10,000 States Convention was originally attended by 2 Federation envoys. The previous Federation envoys were the main team members, and the younger generation envoys were the substitutes. During the previous 10,000 States Convention, Liu Yifan had been a substitute. In the Star Web test space, the Radiance 100 sequence test lasted for 3 days. In the eyes of many spectators, this test was already very long. To every examinee's mentality, this was a huge test. That was because these people did not know what the 10,000 States Convention was like. Every 10 years, the 10,000 States Convention would be held on an uninhabited continent. The size of this continent was definitely incomparable to the Radiance continent. However, compared to the Agorwan continent next to the Radiance continent, it was basically 1/5 the size of the Divine Wood Federation. At that time, each federation would have 30 contestants, who would represent their federation on this continent to compete. There were many ways to compete. There were simple 1-on-1 arena battles, 2-on-2 team battles, and 5-on-5 team battles. In the arena battles, each person could only go on stage once. There were many things to pay attention to. They had to pay attention to the strategy between the entire team. After the complicated arena, 1-on-1, and team battles, every federation member would be teleported to any location on the continent. At that time, the federation members would develop on this continent and attack each other. The main competition was which federation occupied more land on this continent. This assessment would last for a full 6 months. Previously, as a substitute, Liu Yifan had seen how harsh the 10,000 States Convention test was. To put it bluntly, the arena battles were a competition to reduce the number of people. In the previous 10,000 States Convention, during the arena battles, one of the main team members, a Radiance envoy, was seriously injured. 3 members of the Radiance Knights were dead. No one from the substitute team was injured. This was because the main team of Radiance did not allow substitutes to go on stage. It was just to let the substitute see the world. After the 10,000 States Convention, the previous Radiance envoy retired with honor. All of them entered the land of Radiance for seclusion. After another 2 years, Liu Yifan saw his destiny. Therefore, Liu Yifan was actually quite happy that the Freedom Federation could be this demon. It would let the younger generation of Radiance feel the malice from other federations. Liu Yifan stared at Black and Gao Feng. Since Gao Feng was accepted as a disciple of Cicada Cry, he definitely had more tricks up his sleeves. Therefore, in Liu Yifan's eyes, Gao Feng, a pure support, was a little more special. He could not become a Radiant Glory envoy. There would always be a position in the Radiant Light Knights. Liu Yifan did not know about Black's situation. However, Liu Yifan was full of expectations for Black. After all, Black had broken the record set by the guy with the poker face. This was enough to prove Black's talent. When Qian Yu heard what Liu Yifan said, his face revealed an unbridled smile. Since that's the case, let me, the challenger, make the request. Why don't you come down and play with me? We'll lead our teams and have a competition together. The friendly match that Qian Yu mentioned was actually just a superficial project. If the friendship between the 2 great federations was truly deep, everyone was already drinking and chatting merrily. Why was there a need for a competition in the name of friendship? In the end, Liu Yifan did not give him a chance to save face. He made the topic clear. If it was before, when only Li Shu was around. In the Radiance Federation's territory, even as the 3rd-ranked Freedom Envoy, Qian Yu would never dare to say such a thing. But now, the situation was different from before. The arrival of Goddess Lian filled Qian Yu's heart with confidence. Qian Yu's words made the expressions of the 100 sequence members on the silver stone pillar change. The examinees and the audience watching the live broadcast on Star Web. They all fell into silence. Star Web was the only pastime of the Radiance Federation's citizens in the Spirit Chi Awakening era. It was even closely related to life itself. These people ran their own personal homepages on Star Web. They watched the live broadcast and hit the Star Web tower. Usually, when there was a lively scene, they would come to watch the fun. However, after Qian Yu said those words, the crowd was stunned. Those who originally planned to watch the friendly match and watch the fun all knew. This was no longer a lively scene. The Radiance 100 sequence members were the shining stars of the Radiance Federation. It could be said that 80% of the star web netizens had been fans of the previous 100 sequence members. In the Radiance Federation, Radiance envoys had the same status as Her Majesty. They were the backbone of Radiance. No matter what Chen Yu's identity was, even if Chen Yu was a freedom envoy. At this moment, he wanted to drag Liu Yifan off the stage, and it immediately ignited the anger of the Radiance Federation's people. Lucky little panda, what's going on this time? I gave you face, but you don't want it. You actually want to drag Lord Liu Yifan down, kill them. Scar of Hidden Star, I'm so angry. During the match later, give it your all. Beat all the Freedom Federation's people until they are lying on the ground. Guo Ren, Black, I was such a fan of you before, and I don't have any other requests from you. No matter what, you have to use all your strength this time and beat the Freedom Federation's people down, otherwise, I will turn from a male mother's fan to a hater. Sour and sweet self-knowledge. The Freedom Federation's envoy can't be up to something, right? Our 2-year agreement with the Freedom Federation is just around the corner. Why do I keep feeling that the Freedom Federation might be plotting something? The examinees who had been eliminated all turned their gazes towards the direction of the Freedom Federation's diplomatic mission. Chen Yu, who had participated in the 10,000 Nations Conference, could ignore the gazes of tens of thousands of geniuses. However, Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian couldn't help but feel that the atmosphere was a little tense. Chen Yu wanted to drag Liu Yifan down, which was out of the expectations of the Radiant's 13 Highnesses. However, at this time, no one would say anything. This was because as the Radiance Federation's third-ranked envoy, Liu Yifan was qualified to make a decision. Whether he should participate or not. How this match should be carried out. Upon hearing that, Liu Yifan said in a clear voice, I can participate. Under normal circumstances, the challenge match is between the last 10 sequence members and the other side's last 10 sequence members. Seeing that Liu Yifan had agreed. Suddenly, Chen Yu had a different idea in his mind. Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian were indeed participating in this year's independent 100 sequence assessment. However, Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian went on a killing spree. They directly worked together to eliminate half of the examinees. As a result, the independent 100 sequence examiners had no choice but to ask Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian to withdraw from the assessment midway. The three of them were ranked 88th, 89th, and 90th. The independent 100 sequence members who were originally ranked 88th, 89th, and 90th were allowed to participate in the assessment. Although it was a little against the rules, Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian were independent 100 sequence members after all. If he didn't drag down the other Highness's disciples, he would have led Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian to kill Liu Yifan. What should the Radiance Federation do? Chapter 1691. When Spirit Chi professionals dueled, it didn't matter if they had good or bad intentions. There was always the possibility of an accident. If something happened to one of them, it might not necessarily be because the opponent's attack was too strong. It was also very likely that one side did not block it. If he could really kill Liu Yifan in such a public place, he would definitely be able to do so. The Radiance Federation was not in a position to say anything. Otherwise, in the Radiance Federation's territory, the Radiance Federation would intervene in the friendly match between the two states. He would definitely become the laughingstock of the origin world and lose all of his prestige. By then, Radiance would have 3 Class 5 Creation Masters. Even if the Radiance Federation had one more Class 5 Creation Master, when the other federations mentioned the Radiance Federation, they wouldn't dare to mention it. He wouldn't be as respectful as before. Liu Yifan, the third-ranked Radiance envoy, would attend the Radiance 100 sequence test. It could be said that this was completely out of Chen Yu's expectations. Previously, Chen Yu was only thinking about how to drag Her Majesty's disciple into the water. However, he had never thought that he would be able to pull down the Radiance envoys. Although Chen Yu accepted Li Yang's conditions, he was still unable to accept them. But at the end of the day, he had to take risks. He wouldn't be as confident as he was against Liu Yifan. If he could win this friendly match, he would directly crush Liu Yifan to death. even though he was unable to obtain the 7-star treasured tool promised by Li Yang. But when they returned to the Freedom Federation, as the leader of the diplomatic mission, he would definitely be rewarded handsomely. Thinking of this, Qian Yu looked at Liu Yifan with greed in his eyes. It was as if Liu Yifan himself was a treasure trove. Qian Yu said after staring at Liu Yifan for a while. Then let's begin immediately. Hearing Qian Yu's words, their expressions changed in unison. These three people were Li Yang, Lin Yuan, and Yin Lin. Li Yang looked at Qian Yu gloomily. It could be said that Qian Yu changing his mind in private was equivalent to disrupting Li Yang's original plan. Or rather, it affected the cooperation between Li Yang and Renaissance Second Page. The cooperation with Revival Second Page was very important to Li Yang. If it was before, Qian Yu would have changed his decision at the last minute. Li Yang would definitely stop him. But now, the pity goddess had arrived. As the caretaker of the goddess of compassion, Qian Yu still had to give the goddess of compassion face. After confirming that he could not change his decision, Li Yang did not even look at Second Page Revival, who was at the back of the team. The cooperation between him and the Second Page of Revival had their own purposes. There was no interaction between them to know what the other party's goal was. It could be said that both sides were using each other, and there was no real friendship between them. Therefore, after weighing his own interests, Li Yang decisively abandoned the Second Page of Revival. Without seeing Li Yang, who was whipping Sixth Page, he felt uncertain. Up until now, Li Yang hadn't seen any traces of the 4 horsemen mentioned on the Second Page of the Revival. Li Yang decided to unilaterally stop the cooperation with Renaissance Second Page. He snorted in his heart. Second Page of Revival, you're useless. Die. Li Yang's expression was abnormally stern as he clenched his fists tightly. After witnessing several sacred source lifeforms, Li Yang knew how terrifying their abilities were. A sacred source lifeform's abilities were beyond the phase abilities and exclusive skills. The combination of Fey abilities and exclusive skills could burst out with multiple times the power. Moreover, the Freedom Federation envoys had 3 sacred source lifeforms that could complement each other. The effect would definitely be multiplied. In fact, when the 3 sacred source lifeforms' abilities were unleashed, Luo Yunyang's eyes widened. The sacred source lifeform itself could restrict the opponent from a higher dimension and kill them. Lin Yuan's sacred source lifeform was very special. The sacred sword-wielding queen was formed by the fusion of 2 sacred source lifeforms. Without the fusion, Lin Yuan could use the sacred punishment sword's abilities to produce an attack that far exceeded his current grade. Lin Yuan had gotten the news from Yin Lin. After receiving the news, Lin Yuan had been thinking about how to deal with it. Fortunately, Gao Feng's sacred source lifeform had brought Lin Yuan good news. Lin Yuan might be strong, but he did not dare to be arrogant. He believed that he could be compared to the current Freedom Envoy. No matter how strong a fantasy breed Fey was, there was still a huge difference between it and a myth breed Fey. The Freedom Envoy was the Freedom Federation's top prodigy. Even the Freedom Federation could not produce such pure spirit chi and elemental energy. However, the nurturing of Feys could at least reach Zhong Zegu Lang's standard. It was not that Lin Yuan did not dare to deal with it. Apart from himself and Gao Feng, Li Nao, Zhong Zihao, and the others had performed amazingly in the test. They did not even have a diamond fantasy breed Fey. When it came to a real battle, they would only be cannon fodder. Lin Yuan and Qian Yu could not guarantee that they could protect Gao Feng. Lin Yuan had not told the Moon Empress about Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian's situation. He had only told her about the Freedom Federation's conspiracy. Lin Yuan made up his mind. He had to think of a way to change the situation. Yin Lin's brows were furrowed even tighter than Lin Yuan's. Yin Lin had been thinking of a plan. That way, more of Her Majesty's disciples could come and help Lin Yuan. However, Qian Yu had blocked off this path. With Yin Lin's experience, she naturally knew how terrifying it was when the 3 sacred source lifeforms' abilities were linked. Sensing that the situation was not in Lin Yuan's favor, Yin Lin stood up. Lin Yuan said, "The friendly match is quite interesting. I'm even thinking of participating in it. However, since it is a friendly match, fairness is the most important. From what I know, Chen Yu, the 9 people you brought are not from sequence 91 to 100 of the independent 100. They are from 88 to 97. Among them, 3 of them are the lucky ones of your Freedom Federation who have received the favor of His Majesty. From what I know, there is only one Her Majesty's disciple from 91 to 100 of the Radiance 100 sequence. That is Gao Feng, who is ranked 92. An unfair duel can't be considered a friendly match. Yin Lin's words could be said to have stripped away Chen Yu's conspiracy and laid it bare on the table. This caused Chen Yu's expression to change. Chen Yu said this because he was not afraid. The Radiance Federation did not accept his proposal. Even if the Radiance Federation knew that he did not bring sequence 91 to 100 of the independent 100, they were still newcomers. If the Radiance Federation wanted to maintain its magnanimity, it would not fuss over such a small matter. The news that Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian were favored by the Freedom Federation. This was the chip that the Freedom Federation had thrown out at the sea to rope in the Azure Federation. It was confidential. The Radiance Federation's Majesty did not know. Now that Yin Lin had thrown it out, there was a third party involved. The Radiance Federation did not need to care about the so-called magnanimity. Instead, it was the Freedom Federation who was playing tricks. Chapter 1692. Chen Yu stared intently at Yin Lin. When he had personally approached her, he had been rejected. Could it be that the Azure Federation's envoys had intended to stand on the Radiance Federation's side from the start? However, was this folk prescription Yin Lin's own attitude, or the Azure Federation's? Since the identities of Yin Lin, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian had been thrown out on the table, Chen Yu could only give up the idea of bringing Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian to kill Liu Yifan. Yin Lin's words were the truth. However, no matter what, Chen Yu could not agree to Yin Lin's words. Our Freedom Federation has many people who are favored by Her Holiness. Being favored by Her Holiness does not mean anything. The people in my team are this year's new members of the Radiance 100 sequence, just like Gao Feng is Her Holiness' disciple. Didn't he also participate in the Radiance 100 sequence selection? While speaking, Chen Yu looked at the team. A youth with short, milky white hair who looked like a Shota thought to himself. Her Holiness Na had nurtured this youth for 20 years. Now, he had the same world calamity phaseless beast as Her Holiness Na. Looking at this Shota with short, milky white hair, Chen Yu was rather fearful. Originally, Chen Yu did not intend to let this Shota with long, milky white hair appear. Every time the world calamity phaseless beast reincarnated, it would confuse people's minds. Moreover, this young man had contracted one of the 7 great devils in the Devil's Cathedral. It must be known that not everyone in the Freedom Federation could form a contract with a greater devil. The 3 archdevils who had made a pact with him were now qualified to call themselves gods. Only the Freedom Federation's Holiness and the Freedom Envoys knew of this youth's existence. Even though Yang Ling, Cai Hua, and Yu Changjian were Her Holiness disciples, they did not know about this white-haired Shota's situation. With this white-haired Shota around, Chen Yu was full of confidence. Lan Xun finally understood what Yin Lin meant when she said that he had to stand behind her no matter what. Lan Xun knew that Yin Lin would be partial to the Radiance Federation, but he did not expect it to be so obvious. He really did not know what kind of bewitching drug the Moon Empress disciple had fed Yin Lin. However, the fact that Yin Lin had contracted 2 sacred source lifeforms could not be exposed no matter what. This was the Azure Federation, 2 years later. It was one of the trump cards for the Assembly of 10,000 Nations. Lan Xun immediately communicated with Yin Lin through his mental strength. Lord Azure Envoy, if you want to help the Radiance Federation, I can completely stand on your side. However, no matter what, you cannot participate in this dispute. As long as you don't personally take part, I will support any decision you make. Yin Lin's expression froze when she heard Lan Xun's words. Lan Xun was Yin Lin's teacher, even though Lan Xun usually called her Lord Azure Envoy. However, Yin Lin knew that it was because of Lan Xun's concern for her. At the same time, He also knew that Lan Xun did not agree to his participation because of the Azure 100 sequence members behind him. Because there were no special preparations, there were 3 people favored by His Majesty in the Freedom Federation's diplomatic mission today. In the last 10 of the Radiance 100 sequence, 2 of His Holiness's disciples were different. Yin Lin muttered to herself. Since he could not personally enter the battlefield and fight alongside Black, at the very least, he had to make the Radiance Federation send 2 more His Holiness disciples. At that moment, the Starweb audience and the candidates standing in the Radiance Sacred Hall, even those with slow reactions, could smell a thick smell of gunpowder. They knew that the current situation was not ordinary. It was like the 3 major federations were wrestling with each other. At the same time, Yin Lin and Chen Yu's words had exposed Gao Feng's identity twice. The candidates and the audience finally knew why Gao Feng was so powerful. It turned out that Gao Feng was His Holiness Cicada Cry's disciple. No wonder. Back then, several platycodon flowers had bloomed in the sky of the Radiance Federation. Streams of lava had descended. It could be said that the Freedom Federation and the Radiance Federation had formed an unresolvable hatred. The Azure Federation and the Radiance Federation had always been allies. Now, Yin Lin had stood up and exposed the Freedom Federation's contradiction. This made many Starweb audience pay attention to Yin Lin, the Azure Envoy. At the same time, he had a good impression of Yin Lin, the Azure Envoy. Yin Lin muttered to herself for a moment and said, "A friendly match must be fair to be interesting. A friendly match must be fair to be interesting. The Radiance Federation only has 1 His Holiness disciple. How about pulling 2 more His Holiness disciples into the battlefield? Then, just like your Freedom Federation, eliminate the last 3 people in the 100 sequence. It will be fair if both sides have a team of 10. A 3-way battle. I think you don't want to see it, Chen Yu. I don't want to be the one swinging in the middle either. So, I'll add some fun. I'll take out a unique Lantes mystic realm, a sea demon that was born with the water of life. Whichever side wins, apart from the 2 Federation envoys, the most outstanding member of the winning side will get this sea demon." Yin Lin's words made Lan Xun's face reveal a bitter smile. The Azure Federation's Lantes mystic realm, the Radiance Federation's desolate mystic realm, and the Freedom Federation's Devil Church. They were all mystic realms of the same level. The things produced inside were extremely precious. The sea demon that Yin Lin promised to be born with the water of life. It was comparable to the middle-rank demon in the Devil Church. Lan Xun was even more confused. What did Lin Yuan and Yin Lin talk about in the Fei car? As soon as Yin Lin said that, the white-haired boy in the Freedom Federation's team, there was a strange look on his face. It was as if the sea demon that had awakened the water of life was already in his pocket. The Radiance Holiness, who was standing on the golden stone pillar, had a moved look on his face. They didn't expect Yin Lin to take out such a thing for the Radiance Federation. At this moment, the Moon Empress said, "This palace will also take out a true desolate grade desolate bloodline spiritual object. It will also be given to the candidate with the best performance, apart from the 2 Federation envoys." As soon as the Moon Empress voice fell, the pitiful god's voice sounded. "True desolate bloodline Fey and a sea demon that has awakened the water of life. Interesting. In that case, I will take out a middle-rank demon that was born in the Devil Church." Speaking of this, the pitiful god paused and then changed the topic. "I can take out a great demon and give it to the winner with the best performance, apart from the 2 Federation envoys. However, I have a request." Speaking of this, the pitiful god looked at Lin Yuan. She said with a curious face, "You are less than 19 years old and already have such strength. I'm very interested in you. I'll give you a chance to reach the sky in 1 step. Be my caretaker. How about it?" Chapter 1693. For some reason, the Goddess of Compassion's gaze always fell on Black. The Goddess of Compassion's vision was extremely high, and her mind was never on cultivating the younger generation. Not to mention that Black did not show all of his strength in the battle. For the Goddess of Compassion, who had awakened and grasped the birth matrix, Black showed all of his strength. It was really nothing. Therefore, The goddess of compassion's gaze fell on Black had nothing to do with whether Black was outstanding or not. Moreover, the goddess of compassion was indeed obsessed with appearances, and she was a very experienced existence among them. In addition to improving her strength, gathering resources, and grasping power, the goddess of compassion's greatest hobby was to collect beautiful things. The other majesties of the Freedom Federation would choose to cultivate some lovely and rare fays when they obtained them. However, the goddess of compassion would not cultivate these lovely fays. Instead, she would make these fays into specimens and display them in her palace. Compared to the beauty of vitality, the goddess of compassion preferred the beauty of death. The beauty of death was more worthy of repeated observation. In the early years, the goddess of compassion spent resources to cultivate a team of 200 people. Everyone in these teams, after comprehending the willpower rune, was required to contract fairy source-type lifeforms. Once these people contracted fairy source-type lifeforms and advanced them into fantasy breeds, they would be able to enter fantasy breeds. The goddess of compassion would directly kill these fairies that had completely revealed their bodies and characteristics. She would seal the fairy bloodline in the fairies' bodies. She would make these dead fairy source-type lifeforms into dolls. Then, she would hang hundreds of dolls made of fairy source-type lifeforms on the rotating wind chimes in front of the palace. Looking from afar, there were hundreds and thousands of fairies dancing in the air. But the real situation was that all the fairies were meticulously made into handicrafts. Those teams cultivated by the goddess of compassion died because of their main phase. Their minds were damaged and they became useless. Without exception, these people were all arranged by the goddess of compassion to go to the swamp world. They were sent to the swamp world to work as coolies. The goddess of compassion's exquisite and beautiful core was killing and cruelty. The goddess of compassion's willful personality made all the majesties weaker than the goddess of compassion in the Freedom Federation quite afraid of her. Just like Li Shu standing next to the goddess of compassion. The goddess of compassion had always done things without any taboos. If his opinion was different from the goddess of compassion, even if goddess Lian did not kill him, she would definitely fight him. Back in the demon church, goddess of mercy clearly had the opportunity to contract the second of the 7 greater demons. However, the second one was not as good-looking as the third one. Thus, goddess Lian decisively gave up on the second beast that was stronger and had greater potential, and chose the third beast instead. It could be said that Lian Shen's obsession with good looks had almost reached the point of insanity. Black was now wearing a silver mask on his face. It was impossible to tell from his appearance. Even if his temperament was exceptional and his physique was outstanding. But for someone who was obsessed with good looks, the combination of temperament and bone structure was not as important as one's looks. Lian Shen felt that she shouldn't be looking at a young man. However, when Lian Shen tried to avert her gaze, she found that her gaze would be involuntarily drawn to him. In fact, Lian Shen even felt a sense of intimacy and excitement that came from her bloodline. It was difficult for a pity goddess to be interested in a person or thing. Now, he was indeed interested in Black. That was why goddess Lian dared to say this in the Hui Yarrow's territory. In the Radiance Federation, apart from that old man, no one had the right to call himself a god. At the level of grasping the life providence, the spirit chi professional would activate the life providence. He could already use a power similar to that of a god. He didn't just rely on phase to fight. This was also the main reason why the Lian god's fishtail was able to block the bamboo monarch's golden thread emperor bamboo shadow. Lian Shen knew very well that if she were to fight with that old man, she would definitely die. Even if he couldn't take advantage of the old man. This elder would never be able to protect the Radiance Federation in his hands. An 11-star sacred source lifeform and a 10-star sacred source lifeform were on completely different levels. Although only one of his 2 sacred source lifeforms had reached the 11-star level, it was still an 11-star sacred source lifeform. However, if he used the 11-star sacred source lifeform with all his might, he would be able to draw a circle with the distance between the royal capital and Lantern City. All living beings in the circle were destined to die. Apart from this old man, the Radiant sect's Moon Empress had adopted a heavenly favored spirit from the heaven-blessed mansion. At this time, His strength had already reached above the eternal realm. A favored spirit reaching the eternal realm and an ordinary spirit reaching the eternal realm were two completely different concepts. Given the relationship between the Moon Empress and the favored spirit, the Moon Empress would not be able to escape. If she were to make a move, the favored spirit would definitely help Hui Yao. If not for her misgivings, the Lian god wouldn't have needed to rope in black in front of everyone. Instead, she had directly snatched black over. Before Lin Yuan could react, the Lian god's words left her mouth. The Moon Empress' brows were already tightly knitted. She clenched her left fist. Kang Yu and Mystic Moon, who were standing behind the Moon Empress, subconsciously thought, "This is bad." While the Moon Empress cared for Lin Yuan very much, she also had a desire to protect him that far exceeded that of an ordinary master and disciple. Mystic Moon and Kang Yu were afraid that the Moon Empress would directly attack the Lian god. They both knew that the Moon Empress had awakened her birth providence. She had also embarked on that path. Although the Lian god had embarked on that path nearly 10 years earlier than the Moon Empress. However, due to her bloodline, after the Lian god embarked on that path, her strength could no longer advance. Therefore, if they really fought, the Moon Empress should be able to fight evenly with the Lian god. However, if the Moon Empress really could not hold back her temper, it would definitely not be a good thing for Hui Yao. The expressions of the other 12 majesties also changed slightly. The gazes of the 12 majesties were not on the Moon Empress. However, they could feel the change in the Moon Empress aura. At that moment, in the direction of the silver stone pillar, a youth's cold voice echoed. "Please get this clear. I am from the Radiance Federation. Besides, I have a master, and I will not become your caretaker." The youth's voice sounded very calmly. However, this voice shocked the entire Radiance Federation as it was being broadcasted live on the star web. In fact, as early as the Lian god had publicly roped in Lin Yuan, the star web had already exploded. Memory brush and ink. What the hell? The Freedom Federation's majesties are actually publicly roping in black. Is Black's talent that strong? They are openly snatching geniuses from our Radiance Federation. Little Zhong's tears dry. Didn't you guys hear that Black's age is really less than 19 years old? Why does his age make me think of a person? Damn. If that's the case, isn't Black and Lin Yuan the same age? Wiping tiredness. The Freedom Federation's majesties are really disgusting. Is there no one else in the Freedom Federation? They actually want to openly seduce our Black. Dreaming of you. Didn't you guys see just now? The Freedom Envoy leading the Freedom Federation's team is the caretaker of the Freedom Federation's majesties. As long as Black agrees, he will ascend to the heavens in a single bound. Do you think Black can resist such temptation? 7017K.